Single dad was fired for helping a pregnant woman. She walked into the office and fired his boss. Raymond Cooper never imagined that saving a life would cost him everything. One split-second decision to help a bleeding, pregnant stranger left him jobless, humiliated, and staring down eviction. But what his cruel boss didn't know was that the woman Raymond rescued wasn't just anyone. She was someone with the power to change everything. Stay with me until the end of this story and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this incredible tale travels. The alarm clock's shrill beeping cut through the pre-dawn darkness of Raymond Cooper's cramped apartment at 5:47 a.m. His calloused hand shot out from under the thin comforter, silencing the noise before it could wake Lucas. Raymond lay there for just a moment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that had grown larger over the past month, listening to the rhythmic breathing of his 8-year-old son in the next room. The landlord still hadn't fixed the leak. The landlord never fixed anything. Raymond swung his legs out of bed, his knees protesting with familiar aches, souvenirs from 12 years of warehouse work. At 34, he felt 50. The apartment was cold. He'd kept the heat low to save on the electric bill. November in Chicago had teeth, and this year they bit harder than usual. He pulled on yesterday's jeans and a thermal shirt, both hanging on the chair where he'd left them the night before. No time for a shower. That would come later, if there was time. There was never time. In the kitchenette, Raymond started the coffee maker, a wedding gift from a marriage that had ended 6 years ago when Sarah decided that being a mother wasn't the adventure she'd signed up for. She'd left on a Tuesday. Raymond remembered because Lucas had a dentist appointment that day, and Sarah was supposed to take him. She didn't. Raymond took a personal day from work, drove Lucas to the dentist, and came home to find half the apartment empty and a note on the kitchen counter. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." That was it. No forwarding address, no phone calls, child support checks that came sporadically for the first year, then stopped altogether. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed, filling the small space with the only luxury Raymond allowed himself. He couldn't afford the good stuff, but any coffee was better than no coffee. While it brewed, he moved to Lucas's room, pushing open the door that always creaked no matter how many times he oiled the hinges. His son was buried under blankets decorated with dinosaurs that were starting to fade from too many washes. Lucas's dark hair stuck up in every direction, and his mouth hung slightly open. Raymond felt his chest tighten with love so fierce it hurt. "Hey, buddy," Raymond whispered, sitting on the edge of the narrow bed. "Time to wake up." Lucas groaned, pulling the blanket over his head. "5 more minutes, Dad." "You said that yesterday, and we were late." Raymond tugged the blanket down gently. "Come on, champ, rise and shine." Lucas's brown eyes, Sarah's eyes, blinked open reluctantly. "Is it morning already?" "Afraid so." Raymond ruffled his son's hair. "Get dressed while I make breakfast. You want cereal or cereal?" That got a small smile. "Can I have the one with the marshmallows?" "The dentist said you're getting cavities, remember?" "Just a little bowl?" Raymond sighed. He could never say no to that face. "Okay, but brush your teeth extra good." Back in the kitchen, Raymond poured himself coffee in a chipped mug that read "World's Best Dad," a Father's Day gift from Lucas 3 years ago. He scrambled 4 eggs, splitting them evenly between 2 plates, and added toast. Butter was too expensive, so he used the margarine that never quite melted right. Lucas appeared in his school clothes, jeans with a patch on one knee where Raymond had sewn up a tear, and a blue shirt that was getting too small but would have to last until Christmas. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that came from being each other's whole world. Raymond watched his son pick at his eggs, pushing them around the plate. "What's wrong? Not hungry?" Lucas shrugged. "Tommy's birthday party is on Saturday." "Yeah, that's good, right? You like Tommy." "He's having it at that arcade place, the one with the go-karts and the laser tag." Lucas kept his eyes on his plate. "It costs $20 to get in." Raymond's hand tightened around his fork. $20. That was gas money. That was lunch money for 3 days. That was the difference between paying the electric bill on time or getting a late notice. But it was also his son's social life. His chance to be a normal kid who went to birthday parties and didn't always have to be the one who couldn't afford things. "We'll make it work," Raymond said, forcing brightness into his voice. "I get paid on Friday." Lucas looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. Really? Really? Finish your breakfast. The smile that broke across Lucas's face was worth every sacrifice. Raymond would figure it out. He always did. Maybe he'd skip lunch the rest of the week. Maybe he'd walk to work one day to save gas. Maybe he'd finally sell that old guitar in the closet that he never played anymore. By 7:15, they were in Raymond's truck, a 2003 Ford F-150 with 237,000 miles on it and a passenger side door that only opened from the outside. The engine turned over on the third try, coughing like a longtime smoker before settling into a rough idle. Raymond had been nursing this truck along for 8 years, doing repairs himself in the apartment complex's parking lot, watching YouTube videos to learn how to replace brake pads and change oil. The drive to Lakeside Elementary took 15 minutes through neighborhoods that got progressively nicer the farther they went from Raymond's apartment. Lucas pressed his forehead against the window, watching the houses grow bigger, the yards more manicured. Raymond's stomach twisted. He wanted better for his son. He wanted a house with a yard. He wanted a life where $20 for a birthday party wasn't a financial crisis. "Dad?" Lucas said as they pulled into the school drop-off line. "Yeah, buddy." "Thanks for the party money." Raymond reached over and squeezed his son's shoulder. "Hey, you're my guy. We look out for each other, right?" "Right." Lucas grabbed his backpack, secondhand from Goodwill, but Lucas had covered it with stickers to make it his own. "Love you, Dad." "Love you too." "Learned something today." Raymond watched Lucas disappear through the school doors, waiting until he was safely inside before pulling away. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard, 7:42. He had 18 minutes to get to Hutchinson Distribution Center, and in morning traffic, that was cutting it close. Raymond pressed down on the accelerator, the truck's engine whining in protest. Hutchinson Distribution Center sprawled across 5 acres on Chicago's industrial south side, a massive concrete fortress surrounded by chain-link fencing topped with barbed wire. Raymond had worked there for 7 years, starting as a forklift operator and working his way up to senior warehouse associate, a fancy title that meant he did the same work but occasionally trained new hires. The pay was $16.50 an hour, barely enough to survive on, but it came with health insurance, and that was more than a lot of places offered. The parking lot was already half full when Raymond pulled in at 7:56. He grabbed his lunch bag, a peanut butter sandwich and an apple, and hustled toward the employee entrance. The November wind cut through his jacket, and he hunched his shoulders against it. His breath came out in white puffs. He was reaching for the door when he heard it, a sound that made his blood freeze. A scream. Not a playful scream, not someone fooling around. A genuine scream of terror and pain. Raymond spun around, his eyes scanning the street beyond the parking lot. There. On the sidewalk across from the warehouse entrance, a woman had collapsed. Even from 50 yards away, he could see she was pregnant, very pregnant. She was on her hands and knees, and there was something dark spreading on the concrete beneath her. Blood. For a split second, Raymond's brain did the calculation it had been trained to do. He was already running late. His boss, Howard Bennett, had already written him up twice this month for minor infractions, taking an extra 2 minutes on break, not restacking a pallet exactly the way Howard wanted. One more write-up meant suspension. Suspension meant lost wages. Lost wages meant choosing between food and rent. But the woman screamed again, and Raymond was already running. He sprinted across the parking lot, his work boots pounding against the asphalt. The truck traffic on the main road was heavy, and he had to dodge between vehicles, horns blaring at him. His heart hammered in his chest as he reached the sidewalk. Up close, it was worse than he thought. The woman was in her late 20s, her dark hair plastered to her face with sweat despite the cold. Her expensive-looking coat was open, revealing a dress that was soaked with blood from the waist down. Her eyes were wide with terror, her breath coming in panicked gasps. "Please," she sobbed, reaching up toward Raymond with one trembling hand. "Please help me. Something's wrong. The baby—" Raymond dropped to his knees beside her, his lunch bag forgotten on the ground. Okay, I've got you." "What's your name?" Valerie Hutchinson. I was walking to—" She cried out, doubling over, her hands clutching her swollen belly. "Oh God, something's wrong!" "Hutchinson. The name registered somewhere in the back of Raymond's mind, but there was no time to process it. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. The operator answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? I've got a pregnant woman. She's bleeding heavily. She needs an ambulance right now. Raymond tried to keep his voice calm, but his hands were shaking. We're on South Ashland Avenue near the Hutchinson Distribution Center. Is she conscious? Yes, but she's in pain. There's a lot of blood. I think something's really wrong. Sir, I'm dispatching an ambulance now, but due to traffic, it could be 15 to 20 minutes. Is there any way you can transport her yourself? Raymond looked at Valerie, who was now lying on her side, her face chalk white, her lips taking on a bluish tinge. 15 to 20 minutes. She might not have 15 to 20 minutes. The baby might not have 15 to 20 minutes. I'll take her myself, Raymond said, already scooping his phone between his shoulder and ear as he maneuvered to help Valerie. Ma'am, I'm going to pick you up, okay? My truck is right there. I'm going to get you to the hospital. Please, Valerie whispered. Please don't let my baby die. Raymond slid one arm under her knees and the other behind her back. She was heavier than he expected, but adrenaline gave him strength he didn't know he had. He stood, adjusting her weight in his arms, and started moving as quickly as he could toward his truck. Valerie's blood soaked into his shirt, warm and terrifying. Stay with me, Valerie, he said, his voice steady even though his heart was racing. What hospital do you want? What's closest? St. Mary's, she gasped. My doctor is there. Dr. Patel. Raymond knew St. Mary's. It was 12 minutes away, maybe 10 if he pushed it. He reached his truck and realized he had a problem. With Valerie in his arms, he couldn't open the door. He looked around wildly and saw a younger guy in a Hutchinson uniform walking toward the building. Hey, Raymond shouted. I need help. The guy, Raymond thought his name might be Marcus, jogged over, his eyes widening when he saw Valerie. Holy shit, is she? I need you to open the passenger door, now. Marcus yanked open the stubborn door and Raymond carefully maneuvered Valerie onto the seat, trying to make her as comfortable as possible. She was crying now, quiet sobs that shook her whole body. You're going to be okay, Raymond told her, fastening the seatbelt around her carefully. I'm going to get you there. Just hang on. He slammed the door and ran around to the driver's side, his boots slipping slightly on the damp pavement. The engine turned over on the first try, thank God for small mercies, and Raymond threw the truck into gear, accelerating out of the parking lot fast enough to leave rubber on the asphalt. Talk to me, Valerie, Raymond said, weaving through traffic. He ran a yellow light that was already turning red. Tell me about your baby. Is this your first? Yes, she managed between gasps. First baby, girl. We're naming her Emma. I'm 28 weeks. It's too early. Oh God, it's too early. Hey, modern medicine is amazing. 28 weeks, babies do great. Raymond had no idea if that was true, but he'd say anything to keep her conscious, to keep her fighting. My son, Lucas, he was a week early, and he turned out perfect. Well, mostly perfect. He's terrible at making his bed. That got the ghost of a smile, there and gone in an instant before another wave of pain hit her. Valerie's hand shot out and grabbed Raymond's arm, her nails digging in through his sleeve. I can't lose her, Valerie sobbed. Please, I can't lose her. You won't. I won't let you. Raymond pressed harder on the accelerator, praying no cops were around. The truck shuddered as he pushed it to 60 in a 45 zone. What do you do, Valerie? What kind of work? I run company. Her words were getting slower, her eyes starting to lose focus. No, stay with me. Eyes open, Valerie. Keep talking. Tell me about Emma's nursery. What color did you paint it? Yellow. Valerie's voice was fading. Soft yellow, like sunshine. That's beautiful. Lucas's room was blue, with clouds on the ceiling that glowed in the dark. He loved those clouds. Raymond took a corner too fast, the truck's tires squealing. St. Mary's was 3 blocks away. He could see the hospital sign. Almost there, Valerie. Stay with me. 2 more minutes. But Valerie had gone silent, her head lolling against the window. Raymond's heart jumped into his throat. He laid on the horn, blasting through the hospital entrance, ignoring the proper route to the emergency department and driving straight across the ambulance bay. He slammed the truck into park and jumped out, running around to Valerie's side. "I need help!" he shouted, not caring who heard him. "I need help now!" The automatic doors of the ER burst open, and two nurses rushed out with a wheelchair. Behind them came a doctor in scrubs, already pulling on gloves. "Pregnant female, approximately 28 weeks." Raymond rattled off as they transferred Valerie from his truck to a gurney that had appeared. "Heavy vaginal bleeding, altered consciousness, possible placental abruption." The doctor shot him a surprised look. "Are you medical?" "No, I watch a lot of Grey's Anatomy." It was a stupid thing to say, but his brain wasn't working right. His hands were shaking uncontrollably now, covered in Valerie's blood. They were wheeling her away, moving fast, a whole team materializing around her. One of the nurses stopped and turned back to Raymond. "You probably saved her life," she said simply. "Getting her here that fast. Most people would have waited for the ambulance." Then she was gone, disappearing through the doors with the rest of the team, and Raymond was left standing in the ambulance bay next to his truck with its engine still running, his shirt soaked with blood, his hands trembling, and the realization of what he'd just done slowly sinking in. He looked at his phone. 8:47 a.m. He was 47 minutes late for work. Raymond's stomach dropped. Howard Bennett was going to kill him. No, worse, Howard was going to fire him. This was it. This was the final straw. It didn't matter that he'd saved a woman's life. It didn't matter that there was a baby fighting for survival somewhere in that hospital right now. All that would matter to Howard was that Raymond Cooper had failed to show up for his shift on time. Raymond climbed back into his truck, his legs suddenly weak. He should drive back to the warehouse. He should try to explain. He pulled out of the ambulance bay slowly, his mind racing. What would he tell Howard? The truth? Would the truth even matter? The drive back to Hutchinson Distribution Center took 8 minutes. Each one felt like an hour. Raymond parked in his usual spot, looking down at his blood-stained shirt. He had a spare in his locker. He kept one there for emergencies, though he'd never imagined an emergency quite like this. His hands had finally stopped shaking, but they were still stained red. He scrubbed them with a McDonald's napkin from his glove compartment, but the blood had dried in the creases of his palms, under his fingernails. The employee entrance felt like the door to an execution chamber. Raymond swiped his ID badge, and the lock clicked open. The warehouse was in full operation, the sound of forklifts beeping and pallets being moved filling the cavernous space. The air smelled like cardboard and diesel fuel, an industrial cleaner, a smell that had become as familiar to Raymond as his own home. He'd barely made it 10 feet inside when he heard the voice he'd been dreading. "Cooper!" Howard Bennett stormed across the warehouse floor like a man going to war. At 52, Howard had the build of someone who'd spent too many years behind a desk eating too many desk lunches. His face was perpetually red, as if he was always just on the verge of a heart attack, and his comb-over was a subject of secret mockery among the warehouse staff. But his eyes, those were the eyes of a man who enjoyed his power over others, who relished the fear he inspired in the people who depended on him for their livelihoods. "My office. Now!" Raymond followed Howard across the warehouse floor, acutely aware that work had stopped. Everyone was watching. His coworkers, people he'd worked alongside for years, people he'd trained, people he'd shared lunch breaks with, stood frozen, watching the death march with expressions of sympathy and relief that it wasn't them. Marcus, the kid who'd helped him with the truck door, gave him a subtle nod. That was something, at least. Howard's office was a glass box overlooking the warehouse floor, a fishbowl that allowed him to surveil his kingdom while giving the illusion of transparency. The walls were decorated with motivational posters that said things like, "Success is a choice," and "Your attitude determines your altitude." Howard's desk was neat to the point of obsession, everything at right angles, not a paper out of place. Howard sat down in his chair, an expensive leather thing that Raymond happened to know cost more than Raymond's monthly rent, and steepled his fingers, letting the silence stretch out. It was a power play, one of Howard's favorites. Raymond remained standing. He hadn't been invited to sit. "Do you know what time it is, Cooper?" "Yes, sir. I'm sorry I'm late. There was an emergency." "I don't care." Howard's voice was flat, final. "Do you know how many times I've heard that excuse? Do you know how many people walk through that door every morning thinking their problems are more important than this company? Sir, a pregnant woman collapsed outside. She was bleeding. I drove her to the hospital. Howard's expression didn't change. Did I ask for your life story? Raymond felt anger beginning to simmer beneath his fear. She could have died. Her baby could have died. And that's very noble, Cooper. Very heroic. But what you seem to be forgetting is that you have a job. You have responsibilities. You have a contract that says you will be here at 8 o'clock sharp, ready to work, not 7 minutes late, not 15 minutes late, and certainly not, Howard made a show of looking at his watch, 53 minutes late. I called the ambulance, but they said it would take 15 to 20 minutes. She didn't have that time. There are paramedics for that. There are police for that. There are trained professionals for that. You're not a trained professional, Cooper. You are a warehouse associate. And a warehouse associate who can't show up to work on time is a warehouse associate I don't need. The words hung in the air between them. Raymond felt the floor drop out from under him. This was happening. This was actually happening. Howard, please. I have a son. I need this job. You should have thought about that before you decided to play hero. Howard leaned back in his chair, and Raymond saw it. The glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. Howard was enjoying this. This is your third write-up this month, Cooper. Company policy is clear. 3 write-ups means termination. The first write-up was for taking an extra 2 minutes on break because I was on the phone with my son's school. The second was for, I don't care what they were for, Howard interrupted. The point is, you have a pattern of behavior that shows a lack of commitment to this company. And now this. Frankly, I'm not surprised. People like you, he waved his hand dismissively. You always think the rules don't apply to you. You always think you're special. People like you. Raymond's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He knew exactly what Howard meant by that. He'd heard that tone before, seen that look before. It was the same look the landlord gave him when he was 3 days late with rent. The same tone the clerk at the grocery store used when his card was declined. The look that said, "You're poor, you're disposable, you don't matter." "I'm going to have to ask you to clean out your locker and turn in your badge," Howard continued, pulling a form from his desk drawer. "You'll receive your final paycheck by mail within 30 days, minus deductions for unreturned company property. Sign here acknowledging your termination." Raymond looked at the paper. His vision was blurring, whether from tears or rage or shock, he couldn't tell. 7 years. 7 years of showing up early, staying late, covering other people's shifts, training new hires, breaking his back-loading trucks and moving inventory. 7 years of missing Lucas's school plays and parent-teacher conferences because he had to work. 7 years of loyalty to a company that was throwing him away like garbage because he'd saved someone's life. "I'm not signing that," Raymond said quietly. Howard's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" "I said I'm not signing it. You want to fire me? Fire me. But I'm not going to pretend this is anything other than what it is." "And what is it, Cooper?" Howard's face was getting redder. He didn't like being defied. "It's you getting off on your power trip. It's you punishing me because you can. It's you." Raymond stopped himself, biting back the words that were trying to explode out of him. Yelling at Howard wouldn't change anything. It would just give Howard more ammunition, more reasons to feel justified. Raymond turned and walked to the door. "I'm not finished," Howard called after him. "Yeah, you are," Raymond said without turning around. He opened the door and stepped out onto the warehouse floor, where 50 faces quickly looked away, pretending they hadn't been watching the whole thing through the glass walls. Raymond walked to his locker in a daze. The metal door squeaked when he opened it. Inside was almost nothing: a spare shirt, deodorant, a picture of Lucas that he'd taped to the inside of the door 3 years ago. Lucas was 5 in the picture, holding up a drawing he'd made of the two of them. The figures were stick people, but Lucas had drawn a heart between them. Raymond carefully peeled the picture off the door and folded it, slipping it into his pocket. He changed shirts, stuffing the blood-stained one into a plastic grocery bag. When he closed the locker door for the last time, the sound of metal on metal felt like the closing of a coffin. He was halfway to the exit when Denise caught up with him. Denise was 53, a grandmother of 4 who'd worked at Hutchinson for 15 years. She was one of the few people who'd always been kind to Raymond, who remembered Lucas's birthday, who'd covered for him once when he had to leave early because Lucas had the flu. "Raymond, honey," she said softly, looking around to make sure Howard couldn't see them talking. "I'm so sorry." "It's okay, Denise." "It's not okay. What you did was amazing. That poor woman—" "I just did what anyone would do." "No." Denise grabbed his arm, her eyes fierce. "Not everyone would do that. Most people would have kept walking. You're a good man, Raymond Cooper. Howard Bennett is a miserable excuse for a human being, and karma's going to catch up with him someday." Raymond managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Denise. Take care of yourself." "You too, honey. You call me if you need anything. You hear? I mean it." Raymond nodded, not trusting himself to speak anymore. He pushed through the exit door and emerged into the November sunshine, which felt surreal and wrong. The world should be dark and stormy, not bright and cold and indifferent to the fact that Raymond's life was falling apart. He sat in his truck for a long time, just staring at the warehouse building. His phone buzzed. A text from Lucas's school. "Reminder, Thanksgiving celebration Friday at 2 p.m. Parents welcome." Friday. That was 3 days away. Raymond had requested the afternoon off 2 weeks ago so he could attend. Howard had approved it. Now Raymond wouldn't need the time off because he wouldn't have a job to take time off from. That was the upside, he supposed. He could go to every school event now. He'd have plenty of time. Time and no money to do anything with it. Another buzz. This one was from his bank. Low balance alert. Your checking account has fallen below $50. Raymond laughed, a harsh sound that came out more like a sob. $50. He had $50 to his name, a tank of gas that was nearly empty, and a son who needed lunch money, new shoes, $20 for a birthday party, and a roof over his head. He should start the truck. He should drive home. He should start calling other warehouses, other companies, start filling out applications. But Raymond couldn't make himself move. He just sat there, watching the warehouse loading dock, watching his former coworkers doing the job he'd done for 7 years, the job that was already being filled by someone else, as if Raymond had never existed. His phone rang, making him jump. Unknown number. Probably a spam call. He almost didn't answer, but something made him swipe to accept. "Hello? Is this Raymond Cooper?" The voice was professional, female, uncertain. "Yeah, that's me." "Mr. Cooper, this is Shauna Mitchell. I'm calling from St. Mary's Hospital. I'm calling on behalf of Valerie Hutchinson." Raymond sat up straighter, his hand tightening on the phone. "Is she okay? Is the baby—" "They're both going to be fine, thanks to you. Ms. Hutchinson wanted me to call you. She'd like to meet you, to thank you properly." "That's not necessary," Raymond said automatically. "I'm just glad they're okay." "Mr. Cooper, Ms. Hutchinson was very insistent. She asked if you could come to her office tomorrow at 10 a.m. I know this is short notice, but she's quite eager to speak with you in person." "Her office?" "Yes, sir. Do you know where the Hutchinson building is?" "Downtown, on Wacker Drive." Hutchinson Building, Hutchinson Distribution Center. The pieces finally clicked into place in Raymond's exhausted brain. Valerie Hutchinson. The woman he'd saved wasn't just someone who happened to be walking past the warehouse. She was connected to the company. Maybe she was a manager. Maybe she was in HR. Maybe, "Mr. Cooper, are you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here. 10 a.m. tomorrow?" "That's correct. Just tell security at the front desk that you're there to see Ms. Hutchinson. They'll be expecting you." After she hung up, Raymond sat with the phone in his hand, trying to process this new information. Why would Valerie Hutchinson want to see him in person just to say thank you? A phone call would have been sufficient. A card would have been nice. But asking him to come to an office downtown seemed excessive. Unless she'd heard what happened. Unless someone had told her that Raymond got fired for saving her life. A tiny spark of hope flickered in Raymond's chest, and he immediately tried to extinguish it. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment. Hope was what kept you buying lottery tickets you'd never win and filling out job applications that went nowhere. But the spark wouldn't go out entirely. Raymond finally started the truck and drove home. The apartment looked even more depressing in the afternoon light. He'd left dishes in the sink that morning. Lucas's homework was still spread across the coffee table. The leak in the ceiling had dripped enough water to fill the pot Raymond had placed under it. He sat down on the couch and put his head in his hands. He needed to make a plan. He needed to figure out how to tell Lucas they might have to move. He needed to start job hunting immediately. He needed to call his landlord and beg for more time on rent. He needed to do 100 things, but all Raymond could do was sit there and wonder how his life had come to this. How doing the right thing had cost him everything. How being a good man meant being a broke man. How trying to save a life meant losing his own. The sun was setting when Lucas's school bus pulled up outside. Raymond watched his son hop off, backpack bouncing, talking animatedly to another kid before waving goodbye. Lucas bounded up the stairs to their apartment. Raymond could hear him coming from 2 floors down and burst through the door with the energy only an 8-year-old could have after a full day of school. "Dad, guess what happened in science class today? Mr. Patterson let us do an experiment with volcanoes and we made them explode and—" Lucas stopped, his smile fading as he looked at his father's face. "Dad, what's wrong? Why are you home so early?" Raymond opened his mouth to explain, to tell his son that everything was going to be okay, even though he had no idea if that was true. But looking at Lucas's worried face, those brown eyes so much like his mother's, Raymond couldn't do it. He couldn't dump this on his kid. Not yet. Not when Lucas was still riding the high of volcano experiments and birthday party invitations. "Just got off work a little early today," Raymond said, forcing his lips into something resembling a smile. "Wanted to surprise you. How about we order pizza for dinner?" "Really?" Lucas's face lit up. "Can we get the one with pepperoni and extra cheese?" "You bet." It would take the last of Raymond's money, but what did it matter? Tomorrow he'd figure out how to survive. Tonight, he just wanted to give his son one more normal evening before their world fell apart. They ate pizza on the couch, watching Lucas's favorite cartoon, and Raymond tried to memorize this moment. His son's laughter, the weight of Lucas leaning against his side, the simple peace of being together. Because he knew that moments like these were about to become a luxury they couldn't afford. After Lucas was in bed, Raymond sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, its screen casting a blue glow in the dark apartment. He opened job search websites and started scrolling through listings. Warehouse positions, delivery driver jobs, retail positions. He filled out application after application, each one asking for references he didn't have, experience that suddenly seemed worthless, availability that was at the mercy of a single-parent schedule. It was past midnight when Raymond finally closed the laptop. He had to be downtown at 10 a.m. to meet with Valerie Hutchinson. He had no idea what she wanted, but he knew one thing for certain. His life had fundamentally changed today, and tomorrow would tell him whether it had changed for better or worse. Raymond barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Valerie Hutchinson's pale face, the blood soaking into his shirt, the way her hand had gripped his arm with desperate strength. He kept replaying the moment Howard had fired him, the satisfaction in his boss's eyes, the humiliation of walking past his coworkers, knowing they'd all witnessed his downfall. At 3 a.m., he gave up trying to sleep and sat at the kitchen table, drinking instant coffee and staring at the stack of bills he couldn't pay. When his alarm went off at 7, Raymond was already showered and dressed in the only outfit he owned that could remotely pass for business attire. Khaki pants that were slightly too worn at the knees and a button-down shirt he usually reserved for parent-teacher conferences. He'd ironed it carefully, the ancient iron he'd inherited from his grandmother sputtering and hissing as he worked out the wrinkles. The shirt was blue, slightly faded from too many washes, but it was clean and it fit. That would have to be enough. Lucas appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Dad, why are you so dressed up? Do you have a job interview?" The question hit Raymond like a punch to the gut. He hadn't told Lucas about being fired. He'd planned to wait until after he met with Valerie Hutchinson, until he had some sense of what came next. But his son was perceptive, always had been. "Something like that, buddy," Raymond said, keeping his voice light. "Just a meeting downtown. Mrs. Chen from next door is going to pick you up from school today, okay? I left her number on the fridge in case you need anything." Lucas poured himself a bowl of cereal, studying his father with those too wise eyes. "Is everything okay, Dad?" "Everything's fine," Raymond lied, ruffling his son's hair. "Eat your breakfast. We need to leave in 15 minutes. The drive to Lucas's school was quiet. Raymond kept stealing glances at his son, this beautiful kid who trusted him completely, who believed his father could fix anything. The weight of that trust felt crushing this morning. What would Lucas think when he found out they might lose the apartment? When Raymond had to tell him they couldn't afford birthday parties, or new shoes, or the field trip to the science museum Lucas had been talking about for weeks? "Love you, buddy," Raymond said as Lucas climbed out of the truck at school drop-off. "Have a good day." "Love you too, Dad. Good luck at your meeting." Raymond watched Lucas disappear into the building, then sat there for a moment, gathering his courage. The Hutchinson building was downtown, maybe a 40-minute drive in morning traffic. He'd looked it up last night. A glass and steel tower on Wacker Drive, 53 stories tall. The kind of building Raymond had driven past 1,000 times, but never imagined he'd have reason to enter. The traffic was worse than he'd anticipated. Raymond inched along the Kennedy Expressway, watching the minutes tick by on his dashboard clock, anxiety building in his chest. He couldn't be late. Not today. Not for this. At 9:42, he finally pulled into a parking garage 3 blocks from the Hutchinson building. The attendant informed him it would be $35 for parking. $35. Raymond's jaw clenched. He had $63 in his checking account, but he didn't have a choice. He handed over his debit card and prayed it wouldn't be declined. The card went through. Raymond exhaled and took his parking stub, then half-jogged the 3 blocks to the Hutchinson building, his dress shoes, purchased from Payless 5 years ago, pinching his feet. He arrived at 9:54, slightly out of breath, and stopped to stare up at the building. It was even more impressive up close. The lobby was all marble and glass, with soaring ceilings and modern art installations that probably cost more than Raymond would earn in a lifetime. People in expensive suits moved through the space with purpose and confidence, everyone looking like they belonged there. Raymond felt acutely aware of his cheap clothes, his calloused hands, the way he probably still smelled faintly of the industrial soap from the warehouse despite his shower. He pushed through the revolving door and approached the security desk, where a stern-looking guard sat behind a sleek black console. "Can I help you?" The guard's tone suggested he thought Raymond was lost. "I'm here to see Valerie Hutchinson. My name is Raymond Cooper. I have an appointment at 10. The guard's expression changed immediately, skepticism replaced by something like surprise. He tapped at his computer screen, then picked up a phone. "Yes, Mr. Cooper is here in the lobby." "Understood." He hung up and handed Raymond a visitor badge. "Take the elevator to the 53rd floor. Ms. Hutchinson's assistant will meet you there." The 53rd floor. The top floor. Raymond's stomach did a slow flip as he crossed to the elevator bank. He pressed the button and waited, watching the numbers count down. When the doors opened, a woman in a designer dress stepped out, talking rapidly into a Bluetooth earpiece. She didn't even glance at Raymond as she swept past him. Raymond stepped into the elevator and pressed 53. The doors closed, and he began to rise. The elevator was glass-walled on one side, and as he climbed higher, Chicago spread out below him like a map. He could see the river, the lake, the grid of streets growing smaller and smaller. It was beautiful and terrifying. The elevator slowed and chimed softly. 53rd floor. The doors opened onto a reception area that took Raymond's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was modern and expensive-looking, all clean lines and leather. A massive logo on the wall behind the reception desk read Hutchinson Corporation, in letters that had to be 3 feet tall. A young woman in a perfectly tailored suit stood waiting for him. "Mr. Cooper?" "Yes, that's me." "I'm Shauna Mitchell. We spoke on the phone yesterday. Ms. Hutchinson is expecting you. If you'll follow me, please." Raymond followed Shauna down a corridor lined with glass-walled offices. He caught glimpses of people in meetings, of computer screens displaying graphs and spreadsheets, of a world that operated on a level he'd never experienced. Shauna moved quickly, her heels clicking on the polished floor, and Raymond had to lengthen his stride to keep up. They reached a corner office, Raymond realized, and Shauna paused at the door. "Ms. Hutchinson asked not to be disturbed during your meeting. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." Shauna knocked once, then opened the door. "Mr. Cooper is here to see you." "Send him in." Raymond stepped through the doorway, and the first thing he noticed was the view. Two walls of the office were pure glass, offering an unobstructed vista of Lake Michigan stretching to the horizon. The office itself was spacious, but not ostentatious, decorated with minimalist furniture and abstract art. And behind the desk, rising to her feet with obvious effort, was Valerie Hutchinson. She looked better than the last time Raymond had seen her, but not by much. Her face was still pale, with dark circles under her eyes. She moved slowly, one hand pressed to her lower back, but she was smiling, a genuine smile that lit up her entire face. "Mr. Cooper," she said, her voice warm, "thank you so much for coming. Please, call me Raymond." He took a tentative step into the office. "How are you feeling? How's the baby?" "We're both alive, thanks to you." Valerie gestured to the chairs in front of her desk. "Please, sit down. Can I be honest with you, Raymond? Standing is still a bit challenging." They both sat, and for a moment neither spoke. Raymond could see Valerie studying him, her dark eyes searching his face. He shifted uncomfortably, suddenly self-conscious about his worn clothes and rough hands in this pristine office. "The doctors told me what would have happened if you hadn't gotten me to the hospital when you did," Valerie said finally. "I had a placental abruption. Do you know what that is?" "Not really." "It means the placenta separated from my uterus. I was bleeding internally. Another 10, 15 minutes, and..." She paused, her hand moving unconsciously to her stomach. They had to do an emergency C-section. Emma was born at 28 weeks, weighing 2 pounds, 4 ounces. She's in the NICU now, but she's fighting. The doctors say her prognosis is good. Very good, considering. "Emma," Raymond said softly, "you were telling me about her. In the truck. You said you painted her nursery yellow." "You remembered." Valerie's eyes glistened with tears. "I don't remember much about that morning. It's all fragments, pain and fear and thinking I was going to lose her. But I remember your voice. You kept talking to me, keeping me conscious. You told me about your son. Lucas. He's 8. You probably saved both our lives, Raymond. The doctors were very clear about that. And when I tried to find out who you were, to thank you properly, I discovered something that..." She stopped, her expression hardening. "I discovered that Hutchinson Distribution Center fired you for being late to work because you were saving me." There it was. Raymond had suspected she knew, but hearing her say it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. He looked down at his hands, at the calluses and scars from 7 years of warehouse work. "It's not your fault," he said quietly. "You didn't ask me to help you." "But you did help me, and you were punished for it by my company." Valerie leaned forward, her voice intense. "Raymond, do you know who I am? What I do?" "I figured you worked for Hutchinson Corporation." "Manager, maybe? HR?" "I'm the CEO." The words hung in the air between them. Raymond stared at her, his brain struggling to process this information. CEO, Chief Executive Officer, the person at the very top of the corporate ladder, the person who ultimately owned the warehouse where Raymond had worked, who signed off on the policies and procedures, who controlled the fate of thousands of employees. The woman whose life he'd saved was the CEO of the company that had just fired him. "I didn't know," Raymond managed. "When I picked you up, I just saw someone who needed help." "I know. That's what makes what you did even more extraordinary." Valerie opened a folder on her desk and pulled out several papers. "I've spent the last 24 hours looking into what happened, talking to people at the distribution center, reviewing your employment file, and what I've found has made me very, very angry." She slid a paper across the desk. Raymond picked it up and recognized his employee record. 7 years of performance reviews, attendance records, disciplinary actions. He saw the 3 write-ups from this month. Howard Bennett's harsh comments scrawled in red ink. Habitually late. Disrespectful attitude. Failure to follow procedures. "Those write-ups are garbage," Valerie said flatly. "I talked to your coworkers. Denise Washington? She had a lot to say about you, said you're the hardest worker she's ever seen, said you trained half the current staff, said you've covered shifts when people called in sick, stayed late when shipments ran behind schedule, and never once complained. Denise is a good person." She also said Howard Bennett has been gunning for you for months, that he writes people up for petty infractions, that he creates a hostile work environment, that people are terrified of him. Valerie pulled out another document. So I started digging deeper, and I found something very interesting. She turned her computer monitor so Raymond could see it. On the screen was a spreadsheet showing employee turnover rates. The company-wide turnover rate is about 18%, Valerie explained. That's pretty standard for our industry. But at the distribution center where you worked, under Howard Bennett's management, it's 43%. 43% of his workforce quits or gets fired every single year. Do you know how expensive that is? How much it costs to constantly recruit and train new employees? Raymond shook his head, not trusting himself to speak. Millions, Valerie continued, and it's not just the money. It's the lost productivity, the safety incidents from inexperienced workers, the damaged reputation. I should have caught this sooner, but the distribution centers are just one division of a very large company, and I trusted my regional managers to flag problems. Clearly, that trust was misplaced. She closed the laptop and fixed Raymond with a steady gaze. Tell me about Howard Bennett. What kind of manager is he? Raymond hesitated. Everything in his working-class upbringing told him not to badmouth a former employer. You kept your head down. You didn't make waves. You didn't burn bridges because you never knew when you might need a reference. But looking at Valerie's expectant face, at the evidence she'd already gathered, he realized she wasn't asking for gossip. She was asking for the truth. Howard runs that warehouse like it's his personal kingdom, Raymond said slowly. He writes people up for things like taking 31 minutes for lunch instead of 30. He has favorites. People who kiss up to him get away with anything. Everyone else walks on eggshells. He yells at people in front of the whole staff. He's made women cry. He once threatened to fire a guy because he took a sick day when his kid had the flu. Did you ever report any of this to HR? There's no HR at the distribution center. There's a number you can call at corporate, but Raymond shrugged. Everyone knows nothing happens. You call to complain, and somehow it gets back to Howard, and then your life gets even worse. Valerie's jaw tightened. That's going to change, effective immediately. She pulled out another folder, this one thicker. Raymond, I've been going through financial records, inventory reports, shipping manifests, and I've found discrepancies, lots of them. Shipments that were signed for but never arrived, inventory that disappeared from the warehouse. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars over several years. You think Howard was stealing? I think someone was stealing, and Howard either didn't notice, which makes him incompetent, or he was involved, which makes him a criminal. Either way, he's done. Valerie paused, then added quietly, I'm having a forensic audit done right now. By the end of the week, I'll know exactly what happened and who's responsible. Raymond sat back in his chair, his mind reeling. 24 hours ago, he'd been a warehouse worker just trying to survive. Now he was sitting in a corner office on the 53rd floor, listening to the CEO of a major corporation describe what sounded like a criminal investigation. Why are you telling me all this? He asked. Because you deserve to know. Because you were collateral damage in a situation that never should have existed. Valerie opened her desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. This is a check for $100,000. Raymond's vision actually blurred for a moment. He blinked, certain he'd heard wrong. I'm sorry, what? $100,000. It's not payment for saving my life. You can't put a price on that. Consider it a settlement. Compensation for wrongful termination, emotional distress, lost wages, and my personal gratitude. There are no strings attached. You can take this money and never think about Hutchinson Corporation again if that's what you want. Raymond stared at the envelope as if it might explode. $100,000. That was more money than he'd earned in the last 3 years combined. That was a year of not worrying about rent. That was Lucas's birthday party, and new shoes, and the science museum trip, and college savings, and a future that didn't involve crushing poverty. I can't take this, he heard himself say. Valerie's eyebrows rose. Why not? Because I didn't do anything to earn it. I just helped someone who needed help. That's what you're supposed to do. You don't get paid for being a decent human being. Most people aren't decent human beings when it's inconvenient, Valerie said softly. Most people would have walked past me or called 911 and waited. You didn't. You acted immediately, at personal cost, to save a stranger. That deserves recognition. Raymond's hands were shaking. He clasped them together in his lap, trying to maintain some composure. "I have a son," he said. "I need to be able to look him in the eye and know I did the right thing. If I take this money, it feels like I'm being paid off, like I'm accepting that what happened was okay as long as I get compensated for it." Valerie studied him for a long moment, and Raymond couldn't read the expression on her face. Then, slowly, she smiled. Not the polite corporate smile from before, but something genuine and warm. "You're an interesting man, Raymond Cooper," she said. "All right, no settlement check, but I still want to offer you something." "What?" "A job." Raymond's heart jumped. "At the warehouse?" "No, here, at corporate headquarters." Valerie stood up carefully and moved to the window, looking out over the city. "I need someone at the distribution center who understands what actually happens there, someone the workers trust, someone who won't tolerate the kind of toxic environment that's been allowed to fester, someone with integrity." "You want to send me back there as what? A manager?" "Operations manager," Valerie corrected. "You'd be Howard's replacement. You'd oversee the entire facility, hiring, scheduling, safety protocols, inventory management, everything. You'd report directly to the regional director, and you'd have the authority to make whatever changes you think are necessary to fix that place." Raymond stood up too, his legs unsteady. "I don't have a college degree. I don't have management experience. I'm a forklift driver who, you have 7 years of experience on the warehouse floor. You know every job, every process, every problem. You know the people." Valerie turned to face him. "The best managers aren't the ones with fancy degrees and no practical experience. They're the ones who've done the work themselves, who understand what their employees face every day, who lead by example." "What about the other workers? People who've been there longer than me? They're going to resent me getting promoted over them." "Maybe," Valerie acknowledged. "But Denise Washington told me something interesting. She said when new people get hired, they always ask to be trained by you because you're patient and you don't make them feel stupid for asking questions. She said people respect you. That matters more than seniority." Raymond walked to the window and stood beside Valerie, looking down at the city spread out below them. Somewhere down there was his apartment building with the leaky ceiling. Somewhere was Lucas's school. Somewhere was the warehouse where he'd worked for 7 years and been fired for doing the right thing. "What's the salary?" he asked quietly. $75,000 a year to start, plus benefits, health insurance, dental, vision, 401k matching, 3 weeks paid vacation. After 6 months, if you're doing well, we'll revisit compensation." $75,000. Raymond's current salary had been $34,000. He tried to do the math in his head and couldn't. The numbers were too big, too surreal. That was enough money to move to a better apartment, to buy Lucas new clothes without agonizing over every dollar, to not panic every time the truck made a weird noise or the electricity bill came due. "I need to think about it," Raymond said. Valerie looked surprised. "Really? This is a huge decision. It's not just about me. I have a son who depends on me. If I take this job and I fail, if I screw it up somehow, I'll have burned bridges and lost opportunities. I need to be sure I can do this before I say yes." "Fair enough." Valerie returned to her desk and wrote something on a business card. "This is my direct line, my personal cell phone number. Not many people have this, Raymond. You call me day or night if you have questions, concerns, anything. I want you to take 24 hours and really think about whether this is right for you and your son. But I hope you'll say yes." Raymond took the card, his fingers brushing against the expensive cardstock. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why are you doing this? And don't say it's just gratitude. You could have sent me a thank you note and that check and been done with me. Why offer me a job?" Valerie was quiet for a moment, her hand resting on her stomach. "Because when I was lying on that sidewalk, bleeding and terrified and convinced I was going to die, you didn't see a CEO or a wealthy woman or a connection that could benefit you. You saw a human being who needed help. You didn't ask who I was or what was in it for you. You just acted. That kind of character, that kind of fundamental decency is rare. And it's exactly what my company needs." She paused, then continued, her voice softer. "I built this company from almost nothing. My father started it as a small trucking operation, and I've spent the last 15 years growing it into what it is today. But somewhere along the way, I lost touch with the people on the ground. I surrounded myself with vice presidents and directors who showed me spreadsheets and PowerPoints, but never told me that managers like Howard Bennett were making people's lives miserable. I let that happen, and I'm ashamed of that. You can't know everything, Raymond said. It's a big company. That's not an excuse. It's my name on the building, Raymond. My responsibility. Valerie met his eyes. I want to fix this. Not just the distribution center, but the entire culture of this company. And I think you can help me do that, but only if you want to. No pressure. The job offer stands either way, and if you decide it's not for you, I'll help you find something else. I know people all over Chicago. I can make calls. Raymond nodded slowly, tucking the business card into his wallet. I'll call you tomorrow. That's all I can ask. Valerie walked him to the door, moving slowly but steadily. Thank you for coming, Raymond, and thank you for giving me and Emma a chance to have a life together. Raymond shook her hand, surprised by the strength in her grip despite her obvious fatigue. Take care of yourself and that baby girl. I will. You take care of that son of yours. Shauna appeared to escort Raymond back to the elevators. As he walked down this corridor, he glanced back once and saw Valerie standing in her office doorway watching him. She raised her hand in a small wave, and Raymond waved back before turning the corner. The elevator ride down felt surreal. Raymond kept touching his wallet, feeling the shape of Valerie's business card through the leather. Operations manager. $75,000 a year. Health insurance, 3 weeks of vacation. It felt like a fantasy, the kind of dream you had right before waking up to reality. He was so lost in thought that he almost walked past his truck in the parking garage. When he finally found it, his beat-up F-150 looking even more pathetic than usual in a garage full of BMWs and Mercedes, Raymond just stood there for a moment, key in hand. He could say yes. He could take this job and change everything for Lucas and himself. Or he could say no, take that $100,000 check Valerie had tried to give him, and go find something safer, something less risky, something where he wouldn't be walking back into a warehouse full of people who'd watched him get fired, now as their boss. Raymond's phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen, his neighbor. Lucas home safe. He asked me 3 times if you were okay. Call him when you can. Raymond smiled despite his churning thoughts and climbed into his truck. He pulled out of the parking garage, wincing at the $35 charge, but knowing it didn't matter as much now, and pointed the truck toward home. But instead of taking the highway, he found himself driving through the city, past the warehouse where he'd worked for 7 years. He slowed down as he approached, studying the building like he'd never seen it before. Trucks were backed up to the loading docks. Workers were moving pallets, their breath visible in the cold November air. Raymond recognized shapes and silhouettes. That was probably Marcus on Forklift 3, and there was Denise overseeing a shipment. These were his people. Or they had been. Could they be again? Raymond pulled into a gas station across the street and parked, watching the warehouse. His phone rang, Lucas's number. Hey, buddy, Raymond answered, injecting cheer into his voice. How was school? It was good. We had pizza for lunch. Dad, are you okay? Mrs. Chen said you had an important meeting. I did. It went well. Are you going to get a new job? Raymond looked at the warehouse, at his former co-workers loading trucks and moving inventory, at the building that had been his second home for 7 years. He thought about Howard Bennett's red face and petty cruelty. He thought about Valerie Hutchinson's hand on her stomach and her offer of a second chance. He thought about Denise Washington saying karma's going to catch up with him someday. Maybe karma needed a little help. Maybe, Raymond told his son. We'll see. I'll be home in about 30 minutes, okay? Don't eat too many snacks before dinner. Okay. Love you, Dad. Love you too. Raymond ended the call and sat there for another few minutes, watching his old workplace. Then he pulled Valerie's business card from his wallet and stared at the phone number she'd written in her neat handwriting. 24 hours, she'd said. He had 24 hours to decide. But sitting there in his truck, watching the warehouse where he'd been humiliated and fired for saving a life, Raymond realized he'd already made his decision. He just needed to go home, have dinner with Lucas, and make sure he was doing this for the right reasons. Not for revenge against Howard, Not for the money, though God knew they needed it, but because maybe, just maybe, he could make that warehouse a better place to work. Maybe he could prove that decency and integrity mattered more than petty tyranny and fear. Raymond started the truck and drove home, his mind already racing with plans and possibilities. He didn't know yet that tomorrow would change everything, not just for him, but for every person who worked at that warehouse. He didn't know that Valerie's forensic audit would uncover not just theft, but years of systematic abuse and corruption. He didn't know that in just a few days, he'd walk back through those warehouse doors not as a fired employee, but as the man in charge. All Raymond knew was that he'd been given a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. That evening, Raymond made spaghetti for dinner, Lucas's favorite, and they ate together at their small kitchen table while his son chattered about school and his friend Tommy's upcoming birthday party. Raymond listened with half his attention, the other half consumed by the decision weighing on him. $75,000 a year. Operations manager. The chance to walk back into that warehouse not as the man who'd been fired, but as the man in charge. After Lucas went to bed, Raymond sat on the couch with his laptop, researching what an operations manager actually did. He read job descriptions and watched YouTube videos about management principles. The more he learned, the more daunting it seemed. He'd be responsible for budgets and safety compliance and performance reviews and dozens of other things he'd never done before. What made him think he could do this job? But then he thought about Howard Bennett, who had all the training and credentials and still ran that warehouse like a prison camp. Raymond might not have a business degree, but he knew what it felt like to be treated like you didn't matter. He knew what it was like to choose between buying your kid new shoes or paying the electric bill on time. He knew what it meant to show up every day and give everything you had to a job that could discard you without a second thought. Maybe that was qualification enough. At 11 o'clock that night, Raymond picked up his phone and dialed the number on Valerie's business card. She answered on the second ring, her voice alert despite the late hour. Raymond? I hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all. I'm at the hospital with Emma. She had a good day today, gained 2 ounces. The nurses say that's excellent progress. There was a smile in Valerie's voice, the kind of pure joy that came from a mother watching her child fight and win. Have you made a decision? Raymond took a deep breath. I want the job, but I need you to understand something first. I'm not doing this for revenge against Howard, and I'm not doing it just for the money, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't a factor. I'm doing it because those people at that warehouse deserve better. They deserve to come to work without being afraid. They deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. If I can give them that, then I want to try. That's exactly why I offered you the position, Valerie said quietly. When can you start? How soon do you need me? How about Monday? That gives us 3 days to handle the transition. I want to come to the warehouse myself, Raymond. I want to be there when we make the announcement. The employees need to see that this directive is coming from the very top, that we're serious about change. Raymond's stomach flipped. You're going to fire Howard in person? I'm going to fire him, and I'm going to explain exactly why. That warehouse has operated in the shadows for too long. It's time for some transparency. Valerie paused, and Raymond could hear the faint beeping of hospital monitors in the background. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. About doing the right thing without expecting payment. That's how I want to run this company, Raymond. With that kind of integrity. Will you help me? Yes, Raymond said, and felt the word settle over him like a promise. I'll help you. They talked for another 20 minutes, Valerie outlining the logistics. Raymond would come to corporate headquarters on Friday morning to sign paperwork and attend orientation meetings. On Monday, they'd go to the warehouse together. Howard Bennett would be terminated, the staff would be informed of the management change, and Raymond would officially begin his new role. It sounded simple when Valerie described it, but Raymond knew Monday was going to be one of the hardest days of his life. When they finally hung up, Raymond sat in the dark apartment, listening to the sounds of the city outside his window. A siren wailed in the distance. Someone was arguing in the apartment below. The radiator clanked and hissed. This was the soundtrack of his life, the familiar background noise of poverty and struggle. But maybe, just maybe, that was about to change. Raymond didn't tell Lucas about the job yet. He wanted to wait until it was official, until he'd signed the papers and knew for certain it was real. But on Thursday afternoon, when Lucas came home from school, bubbling with excitement about Tommy's birthday party on Saturday, Raymond pulled a $20 bill from his wallet and handed it to his son. "For the party," Raymond said, "and here's another 10 for the arcade games." Lucas's eyes went wide. "Really? Dad, that's so much money." "You're worth it, buddy." Raymond ruffled his son's hair, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Go have fun. Be a kid." On Friday morning, Raymond returned to the Hutchinson building, this time as an employee rather than a visitor. Shauna met him in the lobby and led him through a maze of corridors to human resources, where a cheerful woman named Patricia walked him through an avalanche of paperwork, tax forms and direct deposit authorizations and benefits elections and company policies. Raymond's hand cramped from signing his name so many times. "Welcome to Hutchinson Corporation," Patricia said, handing him an employee badge with his photo and name. "You're going to do great things here, Raymond. Ms. Hutchinson speaks very highly of you." After HR, Raymond met with the Director of Operations, a stern man named Michael Chen, who explained the reporting structure and performance expectations. Then came a meeting with legal, where an attorney walked him through liability issues and workplace safety regulations. By lunchtime, Raymond's head was spinning with information, but underneath the overwhelm was a growing sense of purpose. This was real. This was happening. Valerie took him to lunch at a restaurant on the 40th floor, an executive dining room with white tablecloths and a view that made Raymond dizzy. They sat by the window and Valerie ordered them both the chef's special without looking at the menu. "How are you feeling?" she asked, studying his face with concern. "Overwhelmed?" "Terrified," Raymond admitted. "I keep waiting for someone to realize they've made a mistake, that I'm just a warehouse worker pretending to be management material." "Imposter syndrome," Valerie said, nodding. "I still get it sometimes, and I've been CEO for 8 years. The secret is that everyone feels that way. The difference between success and failure isn't confidence. It's what you do despite the fear. You show up. You do the work. You treat people with respect. That's what leadership is." Their food arrived, some kind of salmon dish with vegetables Raymond couldn't name, and they ate while Valerie told him about the forensic audit results. What she'd discovered made Raymond's blood run cold. Howard Bennett had been stealing from the company for at least 5 years, maybe longer. He'd set up fake vendor accounts and approved purchase orders for equipment that never arrived, pocketing the difference. He'd been skimming overtime payments, claiming workers had put in hours they hadn't worked and keeping the excess. He'd even been taking kickbacks from suppliers in exchange for preferential treatment. The total theft added up to more than $800,000. "But it's worse than just the theft," Valerie said, her voice tight with anger. "Howard created a culture of fear specifically to prevent anyone from questioning him. He targeted the most vulnerable employees, single parents, immigrants with limited English, people with criminal records who had trouble finding work elsewhere. He knew these people couldn't afford to lose their jobs, so he used that fear to keep them silent. He wrote them up for invented infractions. He threatened them. He made sure everyone knew that crossing him meant losing their livelihood." Raymond thought about all the times he'd seen Howard humiliate someone, all the times he'd watched coworkers cry in the bathroom, or heard them whispering nervously about whether they'd done something to anger the boss. He'd known Howard was a bully, but this was systematic. This was calculated cruelty. "What's going to happen to him?" Raymond asked. "Criminal charges. The evidence is overwhelming. He'll probably go to prison." Valerie set down her fork, her expression hard. "But before that happens, I want everyone at that warehouse to see him face consequences. They need to know that what he did wasn't okay, that the company won't protect managers who abuse their power. That's why Monday is so important." They finished lunch and returned to the executive floor, where Valerie walked Raymond through the warehouse's financial records and operational reports. She showed him inventory systems and safety protocols and maintenance schedules. She introduced him to the regional directors who would be his primary contacts. By the time Raymond left the building at 5 o'clock, his brain was stuffed full of information and his heart was pounding with anticipation and dread. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made Chicago beautiful. Raymond took Lucas to Tommy's birthday party at the arcade, and for 2 hours he tried to focus on watching his son play laser tag and drive go-karts and devour pizza with his friends. Lucas was radiant with happiness, and that made everything worthwhile. The years of struggle, the nights of worry, the constant grinding anxiety about money. This moment, watching his son be a normal kid at a normal birthday party, was worth all of it. On the drive home, Lucas was quiet, exhausted from running around all afternoon. Raymond glanced over at his son, who was slumped in the passenger seat with a goodie bag in his lap and a smile on his face, even though his eyes were closed. "Hey, buddy," Raymond said softly. "I need to tell you something." Lucas opened his eyes. "What's up, Dad?" "Remember how I told you I lost my job at the warehouse? And I had that meeting downtown?" "Yeah. Did you get a new job?" "I got my old job back, sort of. I'm going to be the manager now, the person in charge of the whole warehouse." Lucas sat up straighter, suddenly alert. "Really? That's so cool. Does that mean we'll have more money?" Raymond laughed, his throat tight with emotion. "Yeah, champ. It means we'll have more money. We can move to a nicer apartment, one with a yard, maybe. And you won't have to worry about things like birthday parties anymore. We'll be okay." "We were already okay," Lucas said seriously, with the wisdom of someone far older than 8. "We had each other. That's what you always tell me." Raymond had to pull over because his vision was blurring with tears. He put the truck in park and turned to his son, this beautiful, perfect kid who'd never complained about hand-me-down clothes or peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day or the apartment with the leaky ceiling. "You're right," Raymond said, his voice rough. "We were already okay, but now we're going to be even better. I love you so much, Lucas." "I love you too, Dad. Can we get ice cream to celebrate?" Raymond laughed through his tears. "Yeah, we can get ice cream." They went to the grocery store and bought a container of ice cream, the good kind with real chocolate chunks, and ate it straight from the carton while sitting on their couch. Lucas fell asleep halfway through a movie, his head on Raymond's shoulder, and Raymond sat there holding his son and thinking about Monday, about walking back into that warehouse, about facing Howard Bennett, about standing in front of 50 people who'd watched him get fired and telling them he was their boss now. Sunday passed in a blur of nervous energy. Raymond cleaned the apartment, did laundry, helped Lucas with homework, and tried not to think about the next day. He went to bed early but couldn't sleep, his mind racing with scenarios and possibilities. What if the workers resented him? What if Howard refused to leave? What if Raymond failed spectacularly in front of everyone? At 3 in the morning, Raymond gave up on sleep and made coffee, sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. He thought about his father, who died when Raymond was 15. His dad had worked in a factory for 30 years, coming home every night with his hands black with grease and his shoulders bent with exhaustion. He'd never complained, never asked for more, just put in his time and provided for his family. Raymond remembered his father telling him once, "The measure of a man isn't what he does when people are watching. It's what he does when nobody's looking. You do right because it's right, not because you'll get credit for it." Raymond had saved Valerie Hutchinson's life when nobody was watching. He'd done it because it was right, not because he expected anything in return. And now he had a chance to do right by an entire warehouse full of people who needed someone to stand up for them. He could do this. He had to do this. Monday morning dawned cold and gray, the sky threatening rain. Raymond dressed in the new clothes he'd bought over the weekend, actual dress pants and a button-down shirt that fit properly and didn't have any worn spots. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. He looked professional. He looked like someone who belonged in management. Lucas appeared in the doorway, already dressed for school. "You look fancy, Dad." "Big day today." "Are you nervous?" "Terrified." "You'll be great," Lucas said with the absolute confidence only a child could have in their parent. "You're the best dad and you're going to be the best boss." Raymond drove Lucas to school, then headed downtown to meet Valerie. They'd arranged to drive to the warehouse together. Valerie wanted to make a statement by arriving with Raymond, showing united front. When Raymond pulled into the parking garage at Hutchinson headquarters, Valerie was already waiting, standing next to a black town car with a driver. She looked better than the last time he'd seen her, some color back in her face, though she still moved carefully. She was dressed in a sharp business suit, her hair pulled back, every inch the powerful CEO. But when she smiled at Raymond, the warmth in her expression reminded him of the terrified woman he'd carried to his truck. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." They climbed into the back of the town car, and the driver pulled out into Monday morning traffic. Valerie had a folder with her, documents related to Howard's termination and the audit findings. She reviewed them quietly while Raymond stared out the window, watching the city slide past. "Raymond," Valerie said, breaking the silence, "I want you to know something. What's about to happen? It's not going to be easy. Howard is going to be angry. Some of the workers might be confused or skeptical. There might be people who think you don't deserve this promotion. You need to be prepared for that. I know, but I also want you to know that I believe in you. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think you were the right person for this job. Trust yourself." Raymond nodded, his throat too tight to speak. The warehouse came into view, and his stomach clenched. The driver pulled into the parking lot and stopped near the main entrance. It was 9:47 a.m., near the end of the morning shift's first break. Perfect timing for maximum visibility. Valerie and Raymond climbed out of the town car, and immediately people noticed. Workers standing outside on their break stopped mid-conversation, staring at the CEO emerging from the black car. Raymond saw Marcus, his eyes going wide. He saw Denise, her hand flying to her mouth. He saw the confusion and shock spreading across faces as people recognized Raymond standing beside Valerie Hutchinson. They walked toward the entrance together, Valerie moving slowly but with determination. Raymond's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. They reached the door, and Raymond held it open for Valerie. She stepped through, and he followed. The warehouse fell silent. Forklifts stopped moving. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every single person turned to stare at Valerie Hutchinson and Raymond Cooper walking across the floor together. Raymond could feel their confusion, their shock, their desperate curiosity about what was happening. Howard Bennett's office door was closed, the blinds drawn. Valerie walked straight to it and knocked once, firmly. There was a pause, then Howard's irritated voice. "I said I didn't want to be disturbed." Valerie opened the door anyway and stepped inside, Raymond right behind her. Howard was sitting at his desk, eating a sandwich and watching something on his computer. He looked up, annoyance turning to confusion when he saw who'd interrupted him. "Ms. Hutchinson," he said, scrambling to his feet and wiping his mouth with a napkin. "I wasn't expecting. This is an unexpected. If I'd known you were coming, I would have prepared." "Sit down, Howard," Valerie said coldly. Howard sat, his face going from red to pale in an instant. His eyes flicked to Raymond, and recognition dawned. "What's he doing here?" "I fired him. He doesn't work here anymore." "Actually, he does," Valerie said, "but we'll get to that in a moment. First, I need to discuss something with you. Are you familiar with the name Marcus Wesley?" Howard blinked, confused by the question. "He's one of the forklift operators. Why?" "And Sarah Chen, Daniel Rodriguez, Keisha Williams, do those names mean anything to you?" "They're employees," Howard said slowly, suspicion creeping into his voice. "What is this about?" "Those are some of the people you've been stealing from," Valerie said flatly, and Raymond saw Howard's face go absolutely white. "For 5 years, you've been running fake overtime claims, inflating hours, and pocketing the difference. You've been approving purchase orders for equipment that never arrives. You've been taking kickbacks from suppliers. The total theft is $843,000, Howard. That's a felony." Howard's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. His eyes darted between Valerie and Raymond, looking for an escape that didn't exist. "We have documentation for everything," Valerie continued, opening her folder and spreading papers across Howard's desk. "Bank records showing deposits to your personal account, purchase orders with forged signatures, emails negotiating kickback amounts with suppliers. You weren't even careful, Howard. You thought nobody was watching. You thought you could abuse these people forever and face no consequences." "I don't know what you're talking about," Howard finally managed, but his voice was shaking. "Someone must have... This is a mistake." "It's not a mistake, and we both know it." Valerie leaned forward, her voice dropping to something deadly quiet. "But the theft isn't even the worst part. The worst part is what you did to the people who work here. You created a culture of fear and intimidation. You targeted vulnerable employees and made their lives miserable to keep them from questioning your authority. You wrote people up for invented infractions. You yelled at them, demeaned them, made them feel worthless. And last week you fired a good man for saving my life." Howard's eyes snapped to Raymond again, and this time there was recognition of a different kind. The pieces were falling into place. The pregnant woman Raymond had saved, the CEO standing in his office, the fact that Raymond was here at all. "That's right," Valerie said, seeing his realization. "The pregnant woman Raymond helped? That was me. He saved my life and my daughter's life. And you fired him for being late. You humiliated him in front of his coworkers. You destroyed his livelihood because he did the decent, human thing and helped someone in need." Raymond stood silently, letting Valerie handle this. He'd imagined this moment 100 times over the weekend, imagined what he'd say to Howard given the chance. But now that it was happening, he found he had nothing to say. Valerie was saying it all, and saying it better than he ever could. "You're fired, Howard," Valerie said, and the words rang out in the small office like a judge's gavel. "Effective immediately. You have 15 minutes to clear out your personal belongings. Security will escort you from the building. The police are already aware of the situation and will be contacting you very soon about the criminal charges. If you try to take anything that belongs to this company, if you try to delete any files or destroy any evidence, we will prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. Do you understand?" Howard sat there, his face the color of old newspaper, sweat beading on his forehead. "You can't do this," he whispered. "I already have," Valerie said. She straightened up, adjusting her suit jacket. "Raymond, would you please ask security to come to this office?" Raymond stepped out of the office and found Marcus standing nearby, along with Denise and a dozen other workers who'd been pretending not to listen to every word coming from Howard's office. The glass walls had given them a perfect view of Howard's face as Valerie delivered her verdict. "Marcus," Raymond said quietly, "can you call security up here?" "Already on their way," Marcus said, grinning so wide it looked like his face might split. Man, I wish I could have heard what she said to him. His face went from red to white to green. I thought he was going to throw up. 2 security guards emerged from the stairwell, grim-faced and professional. Raymond directed them to Howard's office, and they took up positions just inside the door while Howard gathered his things with shaking hands. He tried to take a framed photo that had always hung on the wall, and one of the guards stopped him. "Personal items only, sir. No company property." Howard set the frame down with a clatter, his jaw clenched so tight Raymond could see the muscles jumping in his cheeks. When Howard finally finished gathering his belongings, stuffing them into a cardboard box with fumbling hands, he had to walk past Raymond to leave the office. Their eyes met for a brief second, and Raymond saw everything there. Rage, humiliation, hatred, and the dawning realization that Howard's life as he knew it was over. "You think you can do my job?" Howard hissed as he passed, so quietly only Raymond could hear. "You're going to fail so hard. You're nothing, Cooper. You'll always be nothing." Raymond didn't respond. He just watched as security escorted Howard across the warehouse floor, past the workers who'd spent years living in fear of this man. Some people looked away. Others stared openly, unable to hide their satisfaction at seeing Howard Bennett brought low. Denise actually smiled, her eyes bright with tears. When Howard disappeared through the exit door, still flanked by security, a collective breath seemed to release across the warehouse. People started murmuring, speculating, asking each other what the hell just happened and what it meant for all of them. Valerie emerged from Howard's office, and once again the warehouse fell silent. She surveyed the crowd that had gathered, making eye contact with as many people as she could. Then she raised her voice, projecting it across the space with natural authority. "Good morning," she said. "For those who don't know me, I'm Valerie Hutchinson, CEO of Hutchinson Corporation. I apologize for the disruption to your work, but what just happened needed to happen. Howard Bennett has been terminated for cause, and criminal charges are pending. He will not be returning to this facility." A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone in the back started clapping, but stopped quickly when nobody joined in. "I know many of you have questions," Valerie continued. "Over the next few days and weeks, you'll receive more information about the situation and the changes we'll be implementing. But right now, I want to introduce you to your new operations manager." She turned to Raymond, gesturing for him to step forward. Raymond's legs felt like concrete, but he forced himself to move, to stand beside Valerie in front of 50 pairs of eyes. "This is Raymond Cooper," Valerie said. "Some of you know him already. He worked here for 7 years before Howard Bennett fired him last week for being late to work. The reason Raymond was late was because he was saving my life." The silence in the warehouse was absolute. Raymond could hear his own heartbeat, could hear the distant sound of traffic outside. I was walking past this building 8 days ago when I collapsed, Valerie said, her hand moving unconsciously to her stomach. I was bleeding, terrified, convinced I was dying. Raymond didn't hesitate. He picked me up, drove me to the hospital, and saved both me and my unborn daughter. He did this knowing he'd be late for work. He did it anyway, because it was the right thing to do, and Howard Bennett fired him for it. Raymond saw the expressions changing across the crowd. Shock giving way to understanding. Giving way to something that looked like anger on behalf of what had been done to him. Raymond could have accepted a settlement and walked away, Valerie continued. But instead, he accepted my offer to return here as operations manager. Not for revenge, not for power, but because he believes you deserve better. He believes this workplace should be somewhere people come without fear, somewhere you're treated with dignity and respect. Somewhere doing the right thing doesn't get you punished. Valerie turned to face Raymond fully, and when she spoke again, her voice was filled with emotion. The woman he saved? The one who was pregnant and bleeding and convinced she was dying? That was me. My daughter Emma is in the NICU right now, fighting to grow strong enough to come home. She wouldn't exist without Raymond Cooper. I wouldn't exist without Raymond Cooper. So when I tell you that this man has more integrity in his little finger than Howard Bennett had in his entire body, when I tell you that Raymond is exactly the kind of leader this company needs, I'm not guessing. I know it for a fact. She extended her hand to Raymond. Raymond Cooper is your new operations manager, effective immediately. I expect you all to give him the same respect and cooperation you would give me. This warehouse is going to change, and it's going to change for the better. Thank you all for your attention. Please return to work. Valerie shook Raymond's hand firmly, then turned and walked back toward the exit, leaving Raymond standing alone in front of the warehouse staff. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Denise started clapping. Slowly at first, then faster, then louder. Marcus joined in, then others. And suddenly the warehouse was filled with applause, the sound echoing off the high ceilings and concrete walls. Raymond felt his eyes burning with tears he refused to let fall. He nodded to acknowledge the applause, cleared his throat, and raised his hand for quiet. The clapping died down, and everyone waited to hear what he would say. I know this is a lot to process, Raymond began, his voice surprisingly steady. I know some of you might have questions about whether I'm qualified for this position. The honest answer is, I don't know if I am. I've never been a manager before. I'm going to make mistakes, but here's what I promise you. I will show up every day and do my absolute best. I will listen to your concerns. I will treat you the way I want to be treated, with respect and fairness, and I will never ever make you afraid to come to work. He paused, looking around at faces he'd known for years and faces that were newer, people he'd trained and people who'd trained him. This is our warehouse, Raymond said. Not mine, ours. We're going to build something here, a place where people want to work, a place where you can take pride in what you do. I can't do that alone. I need all of you. So if you have ideas, if you see problems, if you think something needs to change, my door is always open. Literally. No more closed blinds. No more private kingdom. We're a team, and we're going to act like one. More applause, and this time Raymond let himself smile. He looked around the warehouse, at the loading docks and the inventory shelves and the forklifts and all the familiar details of a place that had been his second home for 7 years. Howard's office was visible through the glass walls, empty now, waiting for its new occupant. Raymond Cooper, operations manager. It still didn't feel real. But as he watched his coworkers return to work, as he saw the subtle changes already happening, people standing a little straighter, talking a little louder, the fear beginning to lift like morning fog, he knew that whether it felt real or not, it was happening. And he was ready. The warehouse didn't transform overnight, but it started changing the moment Raymond moved into that glass office. His first act as operations manager was opening the blinds Howard had kept perpetually closed. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and suddenly that office didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like part of the warehouse, connected to the people working outside its walls. Raymond spent his first week mostly listening. He walked the floor constantly, stopping at every workstation, asking people about their jobs and what made them difficult. He sat with the forklift operators during their breaks, ate lunch with the loading dock crew, stayed late to talk with the night shift. Some people were cautious at first, uncertain if this new openness was genuine or just another management trick. But Raymond was patient. He'd spent 7 years working alongside these people. They knew him. They just needed time to believe that becoming their boss hadn't changed who he was. Marcus was the first to really open up. On Wednesday afternoon, he knocked on Raymond's office door, the door that now stayed open unless Raymond was in a confidential meeting, and stood there nervously shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Come in," Raymond said, looking up from the computer where he'd been reviewing safety incident reports. "What's up, Marcus?" "I just wanted to say thanks," Marcus said, not quite meeting Raymond's eyes, "for what you're doing here. It's different already. People are talking about it, about how maybe this place won't suck anymore." Raymond smiled. High praise. Maybe won't suck anymore. "You know what I mean." Marcus finally looked at him directly. "Howard used to make people cry, man. I saw him reduce Keisha to tears because she asked if she could leave 10 minutes early for her kid's doctor appointment. He wrote her up for even asking. That kind of thing, it messes with your head. You start to feel like you're worthless, like you're lucky to even have a job here." "That's over," Raymond said firmly. "If you need to leave early for your kid's doctor appointment, you tell me and we'll make it work. Life happens. Family comes first. The work will still be here." Marcus nodded slowly. "See, that's what I'm talking about. Howard would have told me family is my problem, not the company's. You get it, because you're a dad too. You know what it's like." After Marcus left, Raymond sat thinking about that conversation. Family comes first. It seemed so obvious, so basic. But in Howard's warehouse, that simple truth had been treated like a weakness, something to be exploited and punished. Raymond pulled out a notebook. He'd started keeping one to track all the ideas and problems people brought to him, and wrote, "Emergency leave policy, family medical appointments, school events." By the end of his second week, Raymond had filled 3 notebooks. The problems were bigger and more systematic than he'd realized. The safety equipment was outdated. The break room had exactly 1 microwave for 50 employees. There was no flexibility in scheduling, so single parents like himself had to choose between their jobs and their kids' school events. The health insurance had a deductible so high that people avoided going to the doctor even when they were seriously ill. Workers were expected to lift boxes that exceeded OSHA weight limits. The list went on and on. Raymond brought his concerns to Michael Chen, his regional director, during their first monthly review meeting. Michael listened to Raymond's presentation, complete with photos of safety violations and a spreadsheet detailing the changes Raymond wanted to implement, with an expression that grew increasingly pained. "These changes are going to cost money," Michael said when Raymond finished. "New safety equipment, additional break room facilities, schedule flexibility that might require hiring more workers. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars." "I know," Raymond said, "but consider the alternative. Our turnover rate under Howard was 43%. Do you know what it costs to constantly recruit and train new employees? Not to mention the productivity loss, the safety incidents from inexperienced workers, the overtime we pay because we're always short-staffed. Investing in these changes will save money in the long run." Michael studied him for a long moment. "You've really done your homework." "I've spent 3 weeks listening to people tell me what makes their jobs harder than they need to be. And I've spent 7 years before that experiencing those problems myself. This isn't theoretical for me. I know exactly what it's like to choose between taking your sick kid to the doctor and keeping your job. I know what it's like to throw out your backlifting boxes that are too heavy because you're afraid if you complain, you'll be labeled as weak. These aren't problems, they're people's lives." "Valerie said you'd be like this," Michael said, and there was something almost like amusement in his voice. "She said you'd come in here with passion and conviction and make me feel guilty for even questioning the budget. Is it working?" "Unfortunately, yes." Michael sighed and pulled out his own laptop. "Let me see your numbers again. If we can show a clear ROI within 18 months, I can probably get corporate approval for at least some of these changes." They spent 2 hours going over the details, refining Raymond's proposals, building a business case that would satisfy the finance department. When Raymond finally left Michael's office, He had approval for new safety equipment, an additional break room microwave, and a pilot program for flexible scheduling. It wasn't everything he'd asked for, but it was a start. The changes began rolling out slowly over the next month. New safety harnesses appeared. The break room got a second microwave, a new refrigerator, and a fresh coat of paint. Raymond instituted a policy where employees could request schedule modifications for family emergencies without fear of retaliation. He created a suggestion box, not the fake kind that Howard had kept locked in his office, but a real one that Raymond checked daily and responded to every single suggestion, even the ones he couldn't implement. The atmosphere in the warehouse shifted like weather changing. People started smiling more. The nervous tension that had always permeated the space began to ease. Workers started actually taking their full breaks instead of cutting them short to avoid Howard's wrath. Productivity didn't drop. It actually increased by 12% in Raymond's first month, a fact that Michael Chen gleefully reported to corporate headquarters. But not everyone was happy with the changes. A few of Howard's favorites, the people who'd gotten away with showing up late or doing sloppy work because they kissed up to the boss, resented the new accountability. Raymond had implemented a fair and transparent performance review system, which meant the days of special treatment were over. 2 employees quit when they realized they'd actually have to do their jobs properly. Raymond didn't try to stop them. The bigger challenge came from outside the warehouse. Howard Bennett's arrest made local news, and suddenly the Hutchinson Corporation was dealing with unwanted media attention about workplace conditions and management oversight. Raymond fielded questions from reporters, from corporate communications, from lawyers. It was exhausting and stressful and completely outside his comfort zone. But every time he felt overwhelmed, he thought about why he'd taken this job in the first place. For people like Denise and Marcus and Keisha, for workers who deserved dignity and respect. Valerie checked in with him regularly, usually by phone since she was spending most of her time at the hospital with Emma. The baby was making progress, slowly gaining weight, gradually getting stronger. Valerie's voice always softened when she talked about her daughter, the fierce love of a mother evident in every word. "How's Emma doing?" Raymond would ask at the start of every call. "She's up to 3 pounds, 2 ounces," Valerie said during their 6-week check-in. "The doctors say if she keeps gaining weight at this rate, she might be able to come home by Christmas. How's everything at the warehouse?" "Good. Really good, actually. We had 0 safety incidents this month. Turnover is down to 15%. Employee satisfaction surveys are showing major improvement. I think we're finally building something sustainable here." "I'm proud of you, Raymond. I knew you were the right person for this job." One evening in early December, Raymond was working late at the warehouse, reviewing next quarter's budget and trying to figure out how to fund the remaining improvements on his wish list, when Denise knocked on his office door. She had her coat on and her purse over her shoulder, ready to leave for the day, but something in her expression made Raymond set down his pen. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to tell you something." Denise came into the office and sat down across from him. "My granddaughter asked me yesterday why I've been so happy lately. Said I used to come home from work all stressed and angry, and now I'm different, lighter," she said. Raymond felt his chest tighten with emotion. "Denise, let me finish," she said, holding up her hand. "I've been working here for 15 years, Raymond. 15 years. And I can honestly say the last 2 months have been the first time I've actually enjoyed coming to work. The first time I haven't dreaded walking through those doors. You did that. You changed this place. You changed people's lives. And I just wanted to make sure you knew that. Because some days I know this job is hard. And you're dealing with corporate politics and budget constraints and all kinds of stuff that would make most people quit. But what you're doing matters. It really, truly matters." After she left, Raymond sat alone in his office for a long time, staring at the warehouse floor through the glass walls. The space was quiet now, most workers having gone home for the evening, but he could still see the changes everywhere he looked. The new safety equipment hanging on the walls, the updated signage showing emergency procedures, the bulletin board where workers posted photos of their families and kids' artwork. Small things that added up to something bigger, a workplace where people felt valued. His phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. "When are you coming home? I'm hungry and I can't find the pasta." Raymond smiled and texted back. "Be there in 20 minutes. We'll make dinner together." He gathered his things and locked up his office. a habit he'd kept from his days as a warehouse worker, that instinct to secure everything before leaving. As he walked through the warehouse to the exit, he ran his hand along one of the shelves, feeling the familiar texture of metal and cardboard. This place had been his livelihood for 7 years. Now it was his responsibility, his chance to prove that doing the right thing mattered, that kindness and decency weren't weaknesses but strengths. The first snow of the season was falling when Raymond stepped outside, fat flakes swirling in the parking lot lights. He climbed into his truck, the same beat-up F-150 with 237,000 miles, though he could afford something better now, and started the engine. The radio came on, playing Christmas music already, even though Thanksgiving hadn't arrived yet. Raymond found himself humming along as he drove through the snowy streets toward home. Lucas was waiting at the door when Raymond arrived, bouncing with barely contained excitement. Dad, guess what? I got picked to be in the winter concert. I'm going to play a solo on the recorder. That's amazing, buddy. Raymond scooped his son into a hug, lifting him off the ground despite the fact that Lucas was getting too big for that. When's the concert? 2 weeks from Thursday at 7 o'clock. Can you come? Please say you can come. 2 weeks from Thursday. Raymond mentally checked his calendar. He had a meeting with corporate that afternoon, but it ended at 5. He could make it. More importantly, he would make it. That was the whole point of the changes he was fighting for at the warehouse, so that parents could be parents, so that family didn't have to come second to work every single time. I'll be there, Raymond promised. Front row center. They made spaghetti together, Lucas chattering about school and his friends and the upcoming concert. Raymond listened with half his attention, the other half marveling at how different his life looked now, compared to just 2 months ago. They'd moved into a new apartment 3 weeks earlier, a 2-bedroom in a better neighborhood with heat that worked and a ceiling that didn't leak. Lucas had his own room for the first time in his life, and the kid's joy had been worth every penny of the security deposit. After dinner, while Lucas did homework at the kitchen table, Raymond's phone rang. Valerie's name appeared on the screen. Hey, Raymond answered, moving into the living room for privacy. Is everything okay? Better than okay. Valerie's voice was trembling with emotion, the kind that came from happiness so intense it hurt. Emma came off the ventilator today. She's breathing on her own, Raymond, completely on her own. The doctors say if she keeps this up, she might come home before Christmas. Valerie, that's incredible. I'm so happy for you. I wanted you to know you're the reason she's alive to hit these milestones. I don't think I'll ever be able to thank you enough for that. You don't need to thank me. Just love that little girl and give her a good life. That's thanks enough. After they hung up, Raymond stood at the window of his new apartment, looking out over a neighborhood where kids could play outside without fear, where the streets were lit at night, where the sounds were of families rather than sirens. This was what he'd been working toward his entire adult life, a safe place for Lucas to grow up, a stable income that didn't require choosing between food and rent, the ability to be present in his son's life without constantly worrying about money. He thought about the path that had led him here. Being fired for doing the right thing had seemed like the end of everything. But it had actually been the beginning of something better. Not just for him, but for everyone at that warehouse. Sometimes the worst moments of your life were actually doorways to something you never could have imagined. The weeks before Christmas flew by in a blur of activity. Raymond implemented the last of his approved changes at the warehouse, including a new policy that gave employees paid time off for their children's school events. He attended Lucas's winter concert and cheered so loudly during his son's recorder solo that Lucas turned red with embarrassment and pride. He worked with Michael Chen to plan next year's budget, arguing for even more improvements and winning approval for most of them. On December 23rd, Valerie called with news that Emma was finally coming home. She's 4 pounds, 8 ounces, and she's perfect, Valerie said, her voice thick with tears. Raymond, would you and Lucas like to come meet her? I know it's close to Christmas and you're probably busy, but I'd really like you to meet the little girl you saved. Raymond agreed immediately, and the next morning, Christmas Eve, he and Lucas drove to Valerie's home in one of Chicago's nicest neighborhoods. The house was beautiful, a modern design with huge windows and a yard that seemed impossibly large for the city. But when Valerie opened the door, the house wasn't what Raymond noticed. He noticed how she looked, tired but radiantly happy, her arms cradling a tiny baby wrapped in a pink blanket. This is Emma. Valerie said softly, angling the baby so Raymond and Lucas could see her face. Emma, this is Raymond. He's the one who saved us. The baby was impossibly small, her features delicate and perfect. She was awake, her dark eyes staring up at them with the serious expression all newborns seem to have. Raymond felt his throat close up with emotion. This child existed because he'd made a choice 2 months ago to stop and help a stranger. She's beautiful, Raymond managed. Can I hold her? Lucas asked, his voice awed. If your dad says it's okay and you sit down first, Valerie said. Lucas sat carefully on the couch, and Valerie showed him how to support the baby's head. Then she transferred Emma into his arms. Lucas stared down at the tiny person he was holding with an expression of wonder and terror and absolute concentration. She's so small, Lucas whispered. Dad, look how small she is. You were that small once, Raymond said, sitting beside his son. Hard to believe now. They stayed for an hour, drinking coffee and hot chocolate while Emma slept in Lucas's careful arms. Valerie told them about the long nights in the NICU, the setbacks and victories, the moment when Emma had first opened her eyes and looked at her mother. Raymond shared stories about the warehouse, about the changes happening there, about workers who'd thanked him for making their jobs bearable. As they were leaving, Valerie walked them to the door. Raymond, I'm hosting a company-wide meeting in January, a town hall where we'll discuss the changes happening across all our divisions. I'd like you to speak, to share your story and what you've learned about leadership and creating positive workplace culture. Raymond's stomach dropped. Speaking in front of the entire company, executives and directors and hundreds of employees? I'm not a public speaker, Valerie. You're just the man who saved my life and then turned around and saved an entire warehouse full of people from a toxic work environment, Valerie interrupted gently. Your story matters, Raymond. People need to hear it. Will you at least think about it? He agreed to think about it, though the idea terrified him. As they drove home through the Christmas Eve traffic, Lucas asked, Are you going to do it, Dad? The speech? I don't know. Speaking in front of that many people, I'm not sure I can do that. You saved a lady's life, Lucas pointed out with 8-year-old logic, and you became a manager even though you were scared. You can give a speech. Out of the mouths of children, Raymond thought. His son was right. He'd face scarier things than public speaking. And if sharing his story could help create positive change in other workplaces, wasn't that worth the discomfort? Christmas morning arrived with fresh snow and the particular magic that only happens when you have a child. Lucas woke Raymond at 6 o'clock, bouncing with excitement about the presents under their tree. A real tree this year, not the fake one they'd been using for 6 years. Raymond had gone slightly overboard with gifts, making up for all the Christmases when he'd had to explain why Santa couldn't bring everything Lucas wanted. They opened presents together, the living room filling with wrapping paper and exclamations of joy. Lucas got the video game system he'd been dreaming about, new clothes that actually fit, books and art supplies and all the small treasures of childhood. For Raymond, Lucas had made a picture frame in art class, decorated with painted handprints and the words, World's Best Dad, written in a child's careful printing. Inside was a photo of the two of them from Halloween, both smiling at the camera. I love it, Raymond said, his voice rough with emotion. It's perfect, buddy. They spent the day in comfortable togetherness, playing video games and eating cookies and watching Christmas movies. It was simple and perfect, and everything Raymond had been working toward, time with his son, no stress about money, no fear about what disaster might strike tomorrow. Just peace. That evening, after Lucas had finally exhausted himself and fallen asleep on the couch, Raymond sat in the quiet apartment and thought about the year that was ending. 12 months ago, he'd been struggling to keep his head above water, one missed paycheck away from disaster, constantly worried about Lucas's future. Now he was an operations manager earning more money than he'd ever imagined, living in a safe neighborhood, watching his son thrive. All because he'd stopped to help a stranger. Raymond pulled out his phone and opened his email. He found the message from Valerie about the January town hall meeting and hit reply. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before he began typing. I'll do it. I'll speak at the meeting. You're right. If my story can help create positive change, then it's worth sharing. Thank you for believing in me, Valerie. Merry Christmas to you and Emma. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. then set the phone aside and went to check on Lucas. His son was sprawled across the couch, one arm hanging off the edge, completely zonked out. Raymond covered him with a blanket, turned off the Christmas tree lights, and stood for a moment in the peaceful darkness. The next few weeks would be busy. He'd have to write a speech, practice it, stand up in front of hundreds of people, and share the most vulnerable parts of his story. It would be uncomfortable and scary and completely outside his comfort zone. But that was okay. Growth always was. And Raymond had learned that sometimes the most important things we do are the things that scare us most. He thought about Denise's words. What you're doing matters. It really, truly matters. That was what he'd say at the town hall. Not some polished corporate speech about synergy and best practices. Just the truth. That treating people with dignity and respect wasn't just good ethics. It was good business. That the measure of a leader wasn't how much power they wielded, but how they used that power to lift others up. That sometimes doing the right thing cost everything, but it was still worth it. Raymond moved through the apartment, turning off lights and locking doors, the familiar rituals of ending another day. Tomorrow the warehouse would be closed for the holiday, giving him a rare day off. He'd spend it with Lucas, maybe take him ice skating or to a movie. Just being together, being a dad, being present in his son's life the way he'd always wanted to be. In the bedroom, Raymond looked at the picture frame Lucas had made him, now sitting on his nightstand. World's best dad. He didn't know if that was true, but he was trying his best, and maybe that was all anyone could do. Show up, do the work, treat people with kindness, and hope it made a difference. He climbed into bed, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, Raymond Cooper fell asleep without worrying about tomorrow. Because tomorrow was going to be okay. And so was the day after that. And the day after that. He'd made sure of it. The new year arrived with bitter cold and crystalline skies, and with it came the date Raymond had been both anticipating and dreading. January 15th, the company-wide town hall meeting. He'd spent 2 weeks writing and rewriting his speech, practicing in front of his bathroom mirror, recording himself on his phone, and cringing at how nervous he sounded. Lucas had become his unofficial coach, sitting on the couch and offering feedback like a pint-sized public speaking consultant. "You say too much, Dad," Lucas observed during one practice session. "And you need to smile more. You look scared." "I am scared," Raymond admitted. "But the people listening don't need to know that. Just pretend you're telling me a story. You're good at that." Simple advice from an 8-year-old, but it helped. Raymond stopped trying to sound like a corporate executive and started focusing on simply telling the truth about what had happened and what he'd learned. The speech that emerged was honest and raw and completely unprofessional by business standards, which was exactly what Valerie said she wanted. The morning of the town hall, Raymond woke up with his stomach in knots. He dressed carefully in the suit he'd bought for occasions like this, still not comfortable in dress clothes, but he was learning, and spent extra time on his appearance. Lucas inspected him critically before school. "You look good, Dad. Important." "I don't feel important. I feel like I'm about to throw up." "You're going to do great. Just remember what I said. Tell it like a story." Raymond dropped Lucas at school, then drove downtown to Hutchinson headquarters. The town hall was being held in the building's largest conference center, a massive space on the 20th floor that could hold 500 people. When Raymond arrived 2 hours early to do a tech check, the room was already buzzing with activity. AV technicians were testing microphones and screens. Catering staff were setting up coffee stations. Corporate communications people were reviewing the program schedule on their tablets. Valerie found him standing at the back of the room, staring at the stage with something close to panic on his face. She was carrying Emma in a baby sling, the infant fast asleep against her mother's chest. The sight of them together still moved Raymond in ways he couldn't quite articulate. This living, breathing proof that his split-second decision on a cold November morning had mattered. "Nervous?" Valerie asked, though the answer was obvious from Raymond's expression. "Terrified. What if I mess this up? What if I forget everything I wanted to say? What if people think I'm just some guy who got lucky and doesn't deserve to be here?" "Then you'll be human, which is exactly what this company needs to see." Valerie adjusted Emma's position slightly, her hand protective on the baby's back. "Raymond, you're not speaking today because you're a polished executive or a professional motivational speaker. You're speaking because your story, your real, messy human story, illustrates something important about leadership and character and doing the right thing. Don't try to be perfect, just be yourself. The room began filling up around 10:30. Employees streamed in from all divisions of the company: warehouse workers and office staff, junior employees and senior executives, people Raymond had never met, and people he'd worked alongside for years. Denise arrived with a group from the distribution center, and when she saw Raymond, she gave him an enthusiastic thumbs up. Marcus was there too, looking uncomfortable in a tie, but grinning widely. At 11 o'clock sharp, Valerie took the stage to open the meeting. Emma was being watched by Valerie's assistant in a side room, giving Valerie the freedom to move and speak with her characteristic energy and authority. She welcomed everyone, outlined the agenda, and then launched into a frank discussion about the company's challenges and opportunities in the coming year. "We've grown significantly over the past decade," Valerie said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "But growth without attention to culture is hollow. We can have all the revenue and market share in the world, but if our employees dread coming to work, if they feel undervalued or mistreated, then we've failed at the most fundamental level. A company is only as good as the people who work for it, and those people deserve leadership that honors their dignity and humanity." She paused, letting her words settle over the audience. Raymond, watching from the side of the stage, saw people nodding, saw the attention focused intently on Valerie. "Some of you know that we recently dealt with a serious situation at one of our distribution centers," Valerie continued. "A manager who had been with the company for over a decade was terminated for theft and creating a hostile work environment. The investigation revealed years of abuse, intimidation, and corruption. I take full responsibility for not catching this sooner. I should have been more attentive to what was happening on the ground. I should have created better channels for employees to report problems without fear of retaliation. I failed you, and I'm sorry." The room was absolutely silent. Raymond had never heard a CEO apologize so directly, so personally. He could see the impact of Valerie's words on faces throughout the audience: surprise, respect, and something that looked like relief. "But I also want to share a story about how we discovered this situation," Valerie said, "and about the man who showed us what real leadership looks like. Raymond Cooper, would you please come up here?" Raymond's legs felt like water as he walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, making it hard to see individual faces in the audience, which was both a blessing and a curse. He shook Valerie's hand, and she squeezed his firmly before stepping back to give him the microphone. Raymond looked out at 500 faces, felt his prepared speech evaporate from his memory, and thought about Lucas's advice. "Tell it like a story." "3 months ago," Raymond began, his voice shakier than he wanted but growing stronger with each word, "I was a warehouse worker making $16.50 an hour, living paycheck to paycheck with my 8-year-old son, and terrified every single day that one wrong move would cost me everything. And then one morning, it did." He told them about that November morning, the rush to get Lucas to school, the drive to work, seeing Valerie collapse on the sidewalk. He described the decision he'd faced in that split second: stop to help and be late for work, or keep going and make it to his shift on time. He told them about carrying Valerie to his truck, about her blood soaking into his shirt, about driving through traffic with his heart pounding and a stranger's life in his hands. "I knew I'd be late," Raymond said. "I knew my boss would be angry, but I didn't think I'd be fired. I thought maybe if I explained what happened, if I told the truth about why I was late, it would matter. That doing the right thing would count for something." He described walking into the warehouse 50 minutes late, drenched in blood and sweat, and having Howard Bennett fire him in front of everyone. The humiliation, the fear, going home to his son and wondering how they'd survive. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. "I felt like my life was over," Raymond continued. "I had $63 in my bank account, rent due in 2 weeks, and a kid depending on me. And I kept thinking, this is what I get for trying to help someone. This is what happens when you do the right thing." Then he told them about Valerie calling him, about the meeting in her office, about learning that the woman he'd saved was the CEO of the company that had just fired him, about her offer of a settlement check that he'd turned down, about the job offer that had terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. "Ms. Hutchinson offered me a choice," Raymond said, looking at Valerie, who was standing at the side of the stage. She could give me $100,000 and send me on my way, or she could give me a chance to change the place that had treated me so badly. She asked me to come back as operations manager, to be the boss of the man who'd fired me, to try to build something better. He described his first day back at the warehouse, watching Howard get escorted out by security, standing in front of his former coworkers and promising to be a different kind of leader. The challenges of those first weeks, learning to manage a budget, dealing with corporate bureaucracy, figuring out how to earn the trust of people who weren't sure if the changes were real. I made a lot of mistakes, Raymond said honestly. I still do. But I learned something important. Leadership isn't about having all the answers or never being afraid. It's about showing up every day and trying to do right by the people who depend on you. It's about listening more than you talk. It's about remembering what it felt like to be powerless, so you never abuse the power you've been given. He shared stories from the warehouse about workers who'd thanked him for implementing flexible scheduling so they could attend their kids' school events. About Denise telling him she enjoyed coming to work for the first time in 15 years. About the guy who'd been too scared under Howard to report a safety hazard, but who now felt comfortable bringing problems directly to Raymond's office. Our turnover rate has dropped from 43% to 11%, Raymond said, sharing the numbers that still amazed him. Productivity is up 22%. Safety incidents are down 60%. And you know what the secret is? There is no secret. We just started treating people like human beings instead of disposable resources. We gave them flexibility for family emergencies. We invested in proper safety equipment. We created an environment where people feel valued and heard. That's it. That's the whole formula. Raymond paused, gathering his thoughts for what he wanted to say next. The hard part. The vulnerable part. I know some of you are looking at me and thinking, he got lucky. He saved the CEO's life and got rewarded for it. That's not a replicable model for success, Raymond said. And you're right. I did get incredibly lucky. But here's the thing. I didn't save Ms. Hutchinson's life because I thought it would benefit me. I did it because it was the right thing to do. I would have done the same thing for anyone. And that's what I want to challenge all of us to think about today. He looked around the room, wishing he could see faces more clearly in the bright lights. How many opportunities do we miss to do the right thing because we're afraid of the cost? Raymond asked. How many times do we walk past someone who needs help because stopping would be inconvenient? How many times do we stay silent about injustice because speaking up might hurt our careers? I'm not saying everyone should risk their jobs. I have a kid to feed. I understand those pressures. But I am saying that kindness and integrity matter. They matter in how we treat our coworkers. They matter in how we serve our customers. They matter in every decision we make, big or small. He told them about Lucas, about being a single dad trying to provide for his son while also being present in his life, about all the times he'd had to choose between work and family, and how Howard's warehouse had forced him to choose work every single time. About how his goal now was to create a workplace where people didn't have to make that choice, where being a good parent or caring for an elderly relative or dealing with a medical crisis didn't mean sacrificing your career. We spend most of our waking hours at work, Raymond said. That's just reality for most of us. So shouldn't those hours be spent somewhere that respects us? Somewhere that acknowledges we're whole people with lives and families and responsibilities outside these walls? I think the answer is yes. And I think companies that figure this out, that create cultures of dignity and respect, those are the companies that will thrive in the long run. He was nearing the end of his prepared remarks now, the part he'd practiced most because he wanted to get it right. Ms. Hutchinson asked me to share my story today because she believes it illustrates something important about leadership and character, Raymond said. But I think the real lesson isn't about me at all. It's about what happens when we create systems and cultures that bring out the best in people instead of the worst. Howard Bennett wasn't born evil. He became cruel because he operated in an environment where that cruelty went unchecked, where his behavior was tolerated as long as the numbers looked good. And I'm not naturally a leader or a manager. I'm a warehouse worker who got an extraordinary opportunity. But I'm succeeding because I'm operating in an environment where integrity and compassion are valued, where I have support from people like Ms. Hutchinson and Michael Chen, where I'm encouraged to put people first. Raymond took a breath, feeling emotion rising in his chest, So my challenge to everyone here, whether you're an executive or an entry-level employee, is to think about what kind of culture you're creating with your daily choices. Are you lifting people up or tearing them down? Are you making your workplace somewhere people want to be or somewhere they dread coming? Are you using whatever power you have to help others or to serve only yourself? These choices matter. They add up. They create the kind of company we become. He glanced at Valerie, who was wiping tears from her eyes, then back at the audience. 3 months ago, I was fired for saving a life, Raymond concluded. Today, I'm standing here as operations manager, living in a safe neighborhood with my son, no longer terrified about every unexpected expense, able to be the kind of father I always wanted to be. My life changed completely because I made one choice, to stop and help someone who needed it, and because that someone had the wisdom and courage to reward integrity instead of punishing it. I'm grateful beyond words for this opportunity, and I promise to spend every day trying to be worthy of it by paying it forward, by creating opportunities for others the way Ms. Hutchinson created one for me. Thank you. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave. People stood up, first a few, then sections, then the entire room. Raymond stood on the stage, overwhelmed, as 500 employees gave him a standing ovation. He saw Denise crying and clapping. He saw Marcus pumping his fist in the air. He saw executives in expensive suits standing and applauding alongside warehouse workers in company uniforms. Valerie returned to the stage and hugged him, holding on tight while the applause continued. When she finally let go, she took the microphone back. "That's what integrity looks like," Valerie said, her voice thick with emotion. "That's what this company should be. I'm announcing today that we're rolling out Raymond's warehouse model across all our facilities nationwide. Flexible scheduling for family needs, investment in safety equipment, transparent performance reviews, open-door management policies. We're also creating a new position, Director of Employee Experience, whose job will be to ensure that every Hutchinson Corporation workplace is somewhere people feel valued and respected. And I'm pleased to announce that Raymond Cooper has accepted this position, effective immediately." Raymond's head snapped toward Valerie, shock written across his face. They'd discussed the director position in passing, but he hadn't realized she was going to announce it today, that she'd already decided. Director of Employee Experience. That meant leaving the warehouse, moving to corporate headquarters, having influence across the entire company instead of just one facility. "I know you're surprised," Valerie said to him with a smile, "but you've proven over the past 3 months that you understand what workers need and how to create positive change. I want you to take what you've learned at the distribution center and help us implement it everywhere. Will you accept?" Raymond thought about the warehouse, about the people he'd been working alongside, about Denise and Marcus and everyone else who'd welcomed him as their manager. Could he leave them? But then he thought about all the other warehouses, all the other workers at other facilities who might be dealing with their own versions of Howard Bennett, the impact he could have not just on 50 people, but on thousands. "I accept," Raymond said, and the applause erupted again. The rest of the town hall passed in a blur. Other executives spoke about company initiatives and financial projections, but Raymond barely heard them. His mind was racing with possibilities and plans. After the meeting ended, he was mobbed by people wanting to shake his hand, to share their own stories, to tell him about problems at their facilities that needed addressing. Raymond listened to every single person, taking notes in the small notebook he still carried everywhere. Denise found him in the crowd, her eyes bright with tears. "I'm so proud of you, honey, but I'm also going to miss you at the warehouse." "I'll still visit," Raymond promised, "and the person replacing me as operations manager, you're going to love her. Her name is Jennifer. She worked her way up from forklift operator, and she has 3 kids of her own. She gets it." "You picked her?" "Valerie let me choose my replacement. I picked someone who would continue what we started. Someone who remembers what it's like to be on the bottom." Marcus approached next, looking awed. "Dude, you just became a director. That's insane. You're going to be working on the executive floor?" "Apparently. I don't even know where my office is yet." "This is the craziest thing that's ever happened to anyone I know. You're like a real-life movie." Raymond laughed, but Marcus was right. It did feel surreal. 3 months ago, he'd been living in a crumbling apartment, one financial emergency away from disaster. Now he was a corporate director, earning a salary he still couldn't quite believe. The transformation felt too dramatic to be real, like he'd wake up and find himself back in his old life, struggling to make ends meet. But when Valerie approached with Emma in her arms, when she placed the baby in Raymond's careful hands and said, "This is the little girl who wouldn't be here without you," Raymond knew it was real. Emma was real. The weight of her in his arms was real. The life he'd saved and the life he'd changed, all of it was real. That evening, Raymond picked up Lucas from the after-school program and took him out to celebrate at a restaurant. Not a fast food place or a cheap chain, but an actual nice restaurant with cloth napkins and a menu without pictures. Lucas's eyes went wide when he saw the prices, and Raymond laughed. "It's okay, buddy. We can afford it now. Order whatever you want." Over dinner, Raymond told his son about the speech and the new position. Lucas listened with the serious expression he got when processing important information. "So we're not moving away from Chicago?" Lucas asked. "No, we're staying right here. I'll just be working downtown instead of at the warehouse. I might have to travel sometimes to visit other facilities, but I'll always be home for the important stuff. Your school events, your birthday, weekends together, that's not changing." "Good." Lucas poked at his pasta. "Dad, can I tell you something?" "Always." "I was really scared when you got fired. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry more. But I heard you on the phone trying to find new jobs, and I saw you looking at the bills and looking sad. I thought maybe we'd have to move away or I'd have to change schools. I was afraid we'd be homeless." Raymond's heart clenched. "Oh, Lucas, I'm so sorry you were scared. I tried to hide it from you." "I know, but I'm not a little kid anymore. I understand when things are bad." Lucas looked up at his father. "But they're good now, right? Like, really good? This isn't going to disappear?" "This isn't going to disappear," Raymond promised. "I worked hard for this position. I earned it. And I'm going to keep working hard to make sure we're okay. You don't have to worry anymore, buddy. We're going to be more than okay. We're going to be great." The next morning, Raymond reported to Hutchinson headquarters as Director of Employee Experience. His new office was on the 48th floor, not as high as Valerie's corner office, but high enough that he could see the lake and feel disconnected from the ground. The office was 3 times the size of his old space at the warehouse, with furniture that probably cost more than Raymond used to earn in a month. Shauna helped him get set up, explaining his new responsibilities and introducing him to the team he'd be working with. There were policy analysts and HR specialists and people with titles Raymond didn't fully understand. They all looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and respect. The warehouse worker turned director, the guy whose story had made half the town hall cry. Raymond's first week in the new role was intense. He met with facility managers from around the country, listening to their challenges and assessing which sites needed immediate intervention. He reviewed employee satisfaction surveys and safety reports and turnover data. He started drafting new policies around flexible scheduling and family leave. He visited 3 different warehouses, walking the floors and talking to workers, listening to their stories and taking copious notes. Everywhere he went, people had heard about what happened at the Chicago Distribution Center. They wanted to know if the changes were real, if things would actually be different at their facilities. Raymond promised them it would be, and then he worked 14-hour days to make sure he kept that promise. 6 weeks into his new position, Raymond got a letter delivered to his office. It was handwritten on expensive stationery, and when he opened it, he recognized Valerie's neat script. "Dear Raymond," it read, "Emma is thriving. She's 8 pounds now and hitting all her developmental milestones. The doctors say she's completely healthy, with no lasting effects from her premature birth. Every time I look at her, I think about the choice you made on that November morning. You didn't know who I was. You didn't know how it would turn out. You just knew someone needed help, and you gave it. That kind of goodness is rare, Raymond. Please don't ever lose it. Even as you climb higher in this company, the world needs more people like you. Emma needs more people like you. Thank you for giving us both a chance at life. With eternal gratitude, Valerie." Raymond read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and tucked it into his wallet next to the photo of Lucas. Some things were worth keeping close. The months that followed brought more changes. Raymond implemented new policies across the company, trained managers on creating positive workplace cultures, and worked with HR to revise the employee handbook to emphasize dignity and respect. Not every facility transformed as quickly as the Chicago warehouse had. Change took time, and some managers resisted, but progress was measurable. Company-wide turnover dropped. Employee satisfaction scores climbed. Productivity increased. The business case for treating people well was proving itself in the numbers. Raymond never forgot where he came from. He made a point of visiting the Chicago distribution center every week, walking the floor and checking in with workers. Jennifer, his replacement as operations manager, was doing an excellent job, but Raymond wanted people to know he hadn't forgotten them. Denise always made him coffee when he visited, and they'd sit in the break room catching up on life. "You did good, Raymond," she told him during one visit. "This place is still good, maybe even better. Jennifer's got new ideas and she listens to people. You picked the right person to take over." "I learned from the best," Raymond said, and meant it. Denise had been one of his anchors during those early uncertain weeks as manager. Her wisdom and steady presence had helped him more than she probably knew. One year after being fired, Raymond stood in that same warehouse on a cold November morning, watching the loading dock operations with a cup of coffee in his hands. It was almost the anniversary of the day he'd saved Valerie's life, the day that had changed everything. He thought about how terrified he'd been that morning, how certain that helping a stranger would cost him everything, how wrong and how right he'd been. It had cost him his old life, but it had given him something so much better. His phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. "Don't forget my game is at 4 today." Raymond smiled and texted back, "I'll be there, wouldn't miss it." And he wouldn't. That was the whole point. He had a job that paid well and challenged him and let him make a real difference in people's lives. But he also had the flexibility to be a dad, to show up for his son's basketball games and school conferences and all the small moments that made up a childhood. He'd created the kind of balance he'd always dreamed of, and he was helping others achieve that same balance. Later that afternoon, Raymond sat in the bleachers at Lucas's school, cheering as his son played basketball with the fierce concentration of a 9-year-old determined to make every shot. Lucas had grown 3 inches in the past year, his face starting to lose its childhood roundness. He was becoming a person, Raymond realized with a pang of bittersweet pride. A good person who was kind to others and worked hard and knew that his father would always show up for him. After the game, which Lucas's team won by 3 points, they went out for pizza, their new tradition. Lucas chattered about school and his friends and the science project he was working on. Raymond listened and laughed and felt profoundly grateful for this ordinary, perfect evening. "Dad," Lucas said as they were finishing their pizza, "my teacher asked us to write about someone we admire. Can I write about you?" Raymond felt his throat tighten. "Of course you can, but I'm just your dad. I'm not anyone special." "Yeah, you are," Lucas said seriously. "You saved a lady's life. You became a boss when everyone said you couldn't. You help people at work feel better about their jobs, and you're always there for me. That's pretty special." That night, after Lucas was asleep, Raymond sat on the couch in their apartment. A different apartment now, a better one, but still modest by most standards. He could afford something nicer, but this place suited them. It was clean and safe and filled with their belongings. It was home. Raymond thought about everything that had happened in the past year. The terror and uncertainty of being fired. The surreal meeting with Valerie in her office. The fear of walking back into the warehouse as manager. The challenges and victories of those first months. The town hall speech that had terrified him but opened new doors. The work he was doing now, spreading positive change across the entire company. Sometimes doing the right thing cost everything. But sometimes, if you were extraordinarily lucky, it gave everything back tenfold. His phone rang, Valerie's name appearing on the screen. They'd become friends over the past year, bonding over late-night emails about company strategy and shared stories about single parenthood. Valerie was navigating motherhood alone. Emma's father had left before she was born, and she and Raymond had formed an unexpected alliance of single parents doing their best. "Hey," Raymond answered. "Is everything okay? It's kind of late." "Everything's wonderful," Valerie said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Emma took her first steps today. Real steps, Raymond. 4 of them before she sat down. I filmed it, and I immediately thought, I need to tell Raymond. What? Because she wouldn't be here to take those steps if not for you." Valerie, I know. You don't like when I get sentimental about it, But I'm a mother watching her daughter hit milestones, and I'm allowed to be grateful to the person who made it possible. So thank you. Again. Always. After they hung up, Raymond sat in the dark apartment thinking about butterfly effects and sliding door moments, and how one choice could ripple outward in ways impossible to predict. If he'd driven past Valerie that morning, if he'd called 911 and waited for the ambulance, if he'd accepted the settlement check and walked away, his life and so many other lives would be completely different. But he'd stopped. He'd helped. And the world had rewarded that kindness in ways he never could have imagined. The next day, Raymond returned to work with renewed purpose. He had meetings scheduled with managers from the West Coast facilities, plans to review with HR, policies to draft and refine. The work was never finished. There was always another problem to solve, another culture to improve, another person who needed someone to listen to their concerns. But that was okay. This was what he'd signed up for. This was what mattered. During lunch, Raymond sat in the executive dining room, still not entirely comfortable there, but getting better, and reviewed notes from his morning meetings. Across the room, he saw other directors and vice presidents, all of them confident and polished, and completely at home in this world. A year ago, Raymond would have felt like an imposter among them. Now he realized he belonged here just as much as they did. Maybe more, because he'd actually lived the experiences that most of these people only read about in reports. That evening, Raymond left work at exactly 5 o'clock, another privilege of his new position, the ability to set his own hours, and drove to Lucas's school for parent-teacher conferences. Ms. Patterson, Lucas's teacher, greeted him with a warm smile. "Mr. Cooper, it's so good to see you. Lucas is doing wonderfully this year. His grades are excellent, and more importantly, he's kind to other students. He stood up for a new kid who was being teased last week, made sure he had someone to sit with at lunch." Raymond's heart swelled with pride. "That sounds like Lucas. He wrote his admiration essay about you," Ms. Patterson continued. "Would you like to read it?" She handed Raymond a paper covered in his son's careful handwriting. The title was My Hero Dad. Raymond read about himself through his son's eyes, the father who saved a stranger's life, who became a manager even though it was scary, who worked hard but always made time for basketball games and homework help. The essay ended with, "My dad says the measure of a person is how they treat others when nobody's watching. He treats everyone with kindness, even when it's hard. That's why he's my hero." Raymond had to blink back tears. "Can I keep this?" "Of course. I made a copy for our classroom wall, if that's okay with you." Walking out of the school with Lucas's essay carefully folded in his pocket, Raymond thought about legacy and what we leave behind. He wasn't going to be remembered as a business titan or a revolutionary thinker, but maybe, if he was lucky, he'd be remembered as someone who was kind, someone who helped others, someone who did the right thing even when it was hard. That seemed like enough. The anniversary of that November morning arrived with the same kind of cold, clear weather. Raymond took the day off work and spent it with Lucas, just the two of them. They went to the museum Lucas had been wanting to visit, ate lunch at a restaurant with dinosaur decorations, and talked about everything and nothing. At one point, Lucas asked, "Dad, do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't helped that lady?" "Sometimes," Raymond admitted. "I think I'd still be at the warehouse, still struggling, still worried about money all the time. But I also think I'd still be a good dad to you. That part wouldn't have changed. But you're happier now, right?" "So much happier. Not because of the money or the job title, though those things help, but because I get to spend more time with you, because I don't wake up every morning afraid of what disaster might strike. Because I feel like I'm making a difference in the world. Yeah, buddy, I'm happier." That evening, Raymond received an email from Valerie with a photo attached. Emma was actually standing on her own, with a huge smile on her face. The subject line read, "1 year later." Raymond smiled and saved the photo to his phone. Then he opened a new document on his laptop and began writing. Over the past year, he'd been asked dozens of times to write an article or give interviews about his story. He'd always declined, uncomfortable with the attention, but maybe it was time to share the story more broadly. Not for recognition or praise, but because maybe someone else needed to hear it. Maybe some other person was standing at a crossroads, trying to decide whether to do the right thing or the safe thing, and needed to know that sometimes the right thing led somewhere beautiful. He wrote late into the night, after Lucas was asleep, the words flowing more easily than they had for his town hall speech. He wrote about being fired and terrified and certain his life was over, about the choice to help a stranger, about Valerie's offer and his decision to return to the warehouse, about the challenges and victories of transforming a toxic workplace culture, about learning that leadership wasn't about power, but about service, about discovering that treating people with dignity and respect wasn't just morally right, but practically effective. He wrote about Lucas and single parenthood and the constant juggling act of providing financially while being emotionally present, about Denise and Marcus and all the other workers who'd welcomed him as their manager and helped him learn on the job, about the ripple effects of kindness, how one good choice could create opportunities for hundreds of other good choices. When Raymond finally finished, the sky outside his window was starting to lighten with approaching dawn. He read through what he'd written, made a few small edits, and then attached it to an email to Valerie with the subject line, "For the company newsletter, if you think it's appropriate." The article was published 2 weeks later, not just in the company newsletter, but picked up by business publications and news outlets. Raymond gave a few interviews, always uncomfortable with the attention, but willing to endure it if it might inspire change elsewhere. He talked about his story, but also about the broader lessons, about creating workplace cultures where people felt valued, about the business case for employee well-being, about leadership as service rather than domination. Some of the attention was overwhelming, but it also created opportunities. Other companies reached out asking Raymond to consult on their workplace cultures. He started speaking at conferences and business schools, always bringing the same message. Treat people well, create flexibility for life's challenges, lead with integrity, and the results will follow. Through it all, Raymond stayed grounded by coming home to Lucas every night, by visiting the Chicago warehouse every week, by remembering what it felt like to choose between groceries and rent. He never wanted to lose touch with that struggle, never wanted to become so comfortable in his new life that he forgot why the work mattered. 2 years after being fired, Raymond stood on the loading dock of the Chicago Distribution Center on a bright summer morning, watching the familiar operations with a sense of profound satisfaction. The facility was thriving. The turnover rate was now 8%, best in the company. Productivity continued to rise. Workers smiled and joked and took pride in their jobs. This was what work should be like, Raymond thought. This was what he'd been fighting for. Jennifer, the operations manager, joined him on the dock. "Big day tomorrow," she said. "You ready for it?" Tomorrow was the groundbreaking ceremony for Hutchinson Corporation's new training center, a facility dedicated to developing future leaders from within the company's ranks. The center would identify promising employees, particularly those from hourly positions, and give them the education and support they needed to move into management. It was Raymond's brainchild, born from his conviction that the best leaders were often those who'd done the work themselves, who understood from experience what their employees faced. "Ready as I'll ever be," Raymond said. "Did Valerie confirm she's coming?" "She'll be there with Emma. Apparently Emma's been practicing her walking so she can toddle around at the ceremony. She's determined to be mobile for her first groundbreaking." Raymond laughed. Emma was 19 months old now, a whirlwind of energy and curiosity. He saw her regularly. Valerie had become one of his closest friends, and their kids were growing up together. Lucas was patient with Emma's toddler chaos, playing gently with her and making her laugh with his silly faces. The groundbreaking ceremony was attended by local politicians, business leaders, and media outlets. Valerie gave a speech about investing in people and creating pathways for advancement. Raymond spoke about his own journey and the importance of seeing potential in unexpected places. Then Emma, held carefully by her mother, helped push the ceremonial shovel into the ground while everyone applauded. Afterward, during the reception, a young warehouse worker approached Raymond nervously. She was maybe 22, with anxious eyes and work-worn hands. "Mr. Cooper, I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to say something. I work at the distribution center in Detroit, and I heard about your story, about how you went from warehouse worker to director, and I just wanted to say, that gives me hope. I've been taking community college classes at night, trying to better myself, but sometimes I feel like it's pointless. Like people like me don't get opportunities like the one you got. But your story makes me think maybe we do. Maybe if I work hard and do the right things, I could have a chance too." Raymond looked at this young woman, seeing himself in her anxious hope, her desperate desire for something better, and felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. His story had become bigger than just his own experience. It had become a symbol of possibility for countless other workers who dreamed of more. "What's your name?" Raymond asked. "Angela Martinez." "Angela, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You absolutely have a chance. Not because you'll save someone's life and get lucky like I did, but because you're working hard and investing in yourself. When that training center opens next year, I want you to apply to the Leadership Development Program. Will you promise me you'll apply?" "Really? You think I should?" "I know you should. And when you apply, put my name down as a reference. I'll make sure your application gets serious consideration." Angela's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. Thank you so much." After she walked away, Valerie appeared at Raymond's side, holding Emma, who was squirming to be let down. "You just changed that girl's life," Valerie observed. "Maybe. Or maybe I just gave her the encouragement she needed to change her own life. That's the thing I've learned. People don't need saviors. They need opportunities and support. They need someone to believe in them and give them a chance. The rest they'll do themselves." "Speaking of opportunities," Valerie said, "I want to talk to you about something. The board has been discussing succession planning, and your name keeps coming up. They're impressed with what you've accomplished in 2 years. The culture transformation, the reduction in turnover, the training center initiative. Raymond, they're talking about you as a potential COO in the next few years." Chief Operating Officer, the second highest position in the company, right below CEO. Raymond's first instinct was to laugh and say she was joking, but Valerie's expression was completely serious. "That's insane," Raymond said. "I don't have an MBA. I don't have a traditional business background. The board would never—" "The board has seen the results you've generated. They've seen how you've transformed this company's culture. They've watched you speak at conferences and represent Hutchinson Corporation with integrity and authenticity. You're exactly what this company needs for its future leadership." Valerie shifted Emma to her other hip. "I'm not saying it'll happen tomorrow. You need more experience, more time learning different aspects of the business. But in 3 to 5 years, I think you could be COO, if you want it." Did he want it? Raymond didn't know. Being a director was already so far beyond anything he'd imagined for himself. COO felt like a fantasy, like reaching for something so far above his station that it was almost laughable. But then he thought about Angela Martinez and the thousands of other workers throughout the company who were watching his trajectory, who saw his rise as proof that their own dreams might be possible. If he could show them that someone from the warehouse floor could make it all the way to the executive suite, maybe that would matter. Maybe that would create change that lasted long after he was gone. "I'd be honored," Raymond said. Terrified, but honored. That night, Raymond told Lucas about the conversation. His son was almost 11 now, growing tall and developing his own opinions about the world. Lucas thought about it seriously for a moment, then said, "Will being COO mean you're home less?" "Probably sometimes. It would be more responsibility, more travel. But I'd still make time for the important stuff. Your games, your school events, dinner together most nights. That won't change." "Then you should do it," Lucas said simply. "You're really good at your job, Dad. You help people. And if you can help even more people as COO, then that's what you should do." Over the next 3 years, Raymond prepared for the possibility that Valerie had described. He took on additional responsibilities, learned new aspects of the business, completed an executive education program at Northwestern. He continued speaking and writing about workplace culture, becoming a recognized voice in business leadership circles. He never forgot where he came from, always remembering that warehouse loading dock where his journey had begun. The training center opened and began its first cohort of leadership development candidates. Angela Martinez was among them, having applied and been accepted based on her work ethic and potential. Raymond mentored her personally, watching her grow from a nervous warehouse worker into a confident manager. She wasn't the only one. Dozens of hourly employees moved into leadership roles, creating a pipeline of managers who understood worker experiences because they'd lived them. Emma grew from a toddler into a bright, energetic preschooler. Raymond saw her regularly at company events and social gatherings, each time marveling at the child who almost hadn't existed. She'd started calling him Uncle Raymond, which made his heart swell every time. Lucas adored her, playing with her with the patience of an older brother. Sometimes Raymond would watch the two children together and think about the interconnectedness of lives. how his choice to help a stranger had created not just his own opportunity, but a friendship between these two kids, who might never have met otherwise. 5 years after being fired, Raymond was promoted to Chief Operating Officer of Hutchinson Corporation. The board vote was unanimous. His first day in the new role, Raymond stood in his new office, corner office on the 53rd floor right next to Valerie's, and looked out over Chicago. He could see the distribution center from here, just a small building in the vast urban landscape. But he knew every inch of that building, every person who worked there, every challenge they faced. His phone buzzed with a text from Lucas, now 13. "Congrats on the new job, Dad. Don't forget you promised to help me with my science project tonight." Raymond smiled and texted back, "I'll be home by 6. Pizza for dinner to celebrate?" Obviously. That evening, true to his word, Raymond left the office at 5:30 and drove home. He'd moved again, into a house this time. A real house with a yard where Lucas could play basketball and enough space that they didn't trip over each other. But it wasn't a mansion or anything ostentatious. It was a comfortable middle-class home in a good neighborhood, the kind of place Raymond had dreamed about when he was living in that apartment with the leaky ceiling. He and Lucas worked on the science project together, something about renewable energy and solar panels, while eating pizza at the kitchen table. Later, after Lucas went to bed, Raymond sat on his back porch with a beer, looking up at the stars and thinking about the improbable journey that had brought him here. Sometimes doing the right thing cost everything, but sometimes, if you were extraordinarily lucky and you kept doing the right things day after day, it gave you everything back multiplied 1,000-fold. Not just money or career success, though those were nice, but purpose, meaning, the knowledge that you'd made a difference in people's lives, that you'd used whatever power and influence you'd gained to lift others up rather than consolidate your own position. Raymond thought about Howard Bennett sometimes, wondered what had happened to him. The last he'd heard, Howard had served 18 months in federal prison for embezzlement and fraud. Raymond felt no satisfaction from that, just a sad acknowledgement that fear and cruelty ultimately destroyed the person who wielded them as much as the people who suffered under them. His phone rang, Valerie calling late as she often did, both of them workaholics who sometimes needed to bounce ideas off each other at odd hours. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Your first day as COO?" "Surreal. Overwhelming. Like I'm going to wake up and find out it was all a dream." "It's not a dream, Raymond. You earned this, every step of the way." Valerie paused. "Emma asked me today why you're so important at Mommy's work. I told her you're important because you're kind, and kindness is the most important quality a leader can have. She said she wants to be kind like Uncle Raymond when she grows up." Raymond felt his eyes burn with tears. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about me." "It's true. You've changed this company, Raymond, changed thousands of lives. And it all started because you stopped to help someone who needed it. Never forget that. Never lose sight of why this matters." "I won't," Raymond promised. "I can't. Every time I think about getting comfortable or taking things for granted, I remember what it felt like to be desperate and afraid. I remember being fired for doing the right thing. I remember thinking my life was over. That keeps me humble. That keeps me focused on what matters." Years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and opportunities. Under Raymond's leadership as COO and Valerie's vision as CEO, Hutchinson Corporation became known not just for its business success, but for its workplace culture. They won awards for employee satisfaction and were regularly featured in business publications as an example of how to do things right. Other companies studied their model, trying to replicate their success. Raymond kept mentoring young employees, kept speaking at conferences, kept writing about leadership and workplace culture. He never forgot that he was living proof that the system could work, that opportunities could come from unexpected places, that integrity and hard work mattered. His story had become a touchstone for the company, told and retold, a reminder of what was possible when you valued people over profit. Lucas graduated high school and went to college, choosing to study business with a focus on organizational behavior. "I want to do what you do, Dad," he explained. "Help companies treat people better, create workplaces where people feel valued. You showed me that matters, that it's worth dedicating your life to." Raymond had never been prouder. On the 10-year anniversary of that November morning when everything changed, Raymond stood once again at the Chicago Distribution Center. The facility had been renovated and expanded, modernized in countless ways, but the bones of it were the same. He could still picture exactly where Valerie had collapsed on the sidewalk outside, could still feel the weight of her in his arms, the warm blood soaking into his shirt, the desperate race to the hospital. A monument had been installed near the spot, a small plaque that read, "In recognition that one moment of compassion can change countless lives, November 12th, 2025. It had been Valerie's idea, much to Raymond's embarrassment, but she'd insisted. People should know, she'd said. They should be reminded that kindness matters, that doing the right thing matters. Valerie joined him at the monument now, Emma walking beside her. The girl was almost 11 years old, bright and confident and healthy. Raymond could see Valerie in her features, in the intelligence of her gaze and the determination in her posture. "Do you remember what I was like that day?" Emma asked. She knew the story, had heard it many times, but she liked asking for details. "You were very small," Raymond said, "and very determined to survive, just like your mom. And you saved us both. I helped, but mostly you two saved yourselves by being strong." They stood there together, Raymond, Valerie, Emma, and Lucas, who'd driven over to join his father for this anniversary, looking at the plaque and the warehouse and the world that had grown from that single moment of choice. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd driven past," Raymond said quietly. "If I'd been too worried about being late to stop." "But you didn't drive past," Valerie said. "That's the whole point. When it mattered, you chose compassion over convenience. You chose humanity over self-interest. And look what came from that choice." She gestured around them, at the thriving warehouse, at Emma standing healthy and strong, at Lucas who'd grown up watching his father lead with integrity, at the monument commemorating a moment that had rippled outward into countless other moments, other choices, other lives. "This is what happens when we do the right thing," Valerie continued. "Not always, not every time. Sometimes doing right costs everything and gives nothing back. But sometimes, if we're lucky, it creates something beautiful. Something that lasts, something that changes the world, even if just in small ways." Raymond looked at his son, at this remarkable woman who'd become his closest friend, at the child who almost hadn't existed. He thought about Angela Martinez, who was now a regional manager overseeing 5 facilities, about Denise, who'd retired last year with a pension and the satisfaction of seeing her workplace transformed, about Marcus and Jennifer, and the thousands of other employees whose lives had been touched by the changes they'd implemented, about the leadership training center that had graduated hundreds of managers who'd learned to lead with compassion and integrity. One choice, one moment, one decision to stop and help someone who needed it. That was all it had taken to set everything in motion. And now, 10 years later, Raymond Cooper stood as chief operating officer of a major corporation, living a life he never could have imagined, having impacted thousands of lives for the better. Not because he was special or extraordinary, but because when faced with a choice between self-interest and compassion, he'd chosen compassion. Sometimes doing the right thing cost everything, but sometimes if you were very lucky and very persistent and very true to yourself, it gave you everything back. Not just wealth or success or power, but something far more valuable, the knowledge that your life had mattered, that you'd made a difference, that you'd used whatever gifts and opportunities came your way to lift others up, to create positive change, to make the world just a little bit better than you found it. Raymond Cooper had started as a warehouse worker, living paycheck to paycheck, terrified and struggling and doing his best to provide for his son. He'd been fired for doing the right thing, had faced the possibility of losing everything, had stood at the precipice looking down at disaster, and then he'd been given a second chance. And he'd taken that chance and built something beautiful from it, not just for himself, but for everyone whose lives intersected with his. That was the real lesson, Raymond realized. Not that good things happen to good people. The world was too complicated for such simple equations. But that when you acted with integrity and compassion, when you treated others with dignity and respect, when you used whatever power you had to help rather than harm, you created ripples that spread outward in ways you'd never fully see or understand. That was legacy. That was what mattered. That was worth everything. As the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Raymond Cooper stood with the people he loved most in the world, looking at a monument to a moment that had changed everything, and felt profoundly grateful for the journey that had brought him here. Sometimes kindness cost everything, but sometimes it gave you the world.